Book 2, Chapter 7, of the Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Return of Kari. So Quilla, seated in a golden litter, and accompanied by maidens as became her rank, soon was borne away in the train of the Inca Upanqui, leaving me desolate. Before she went, under pretence of bidding me farewell, none denying her, she gained private speech with me for a little while. "Lord and lover," she said, "I go to what fate I know not, leaving you to what fate I know not. And as your lips have said, it is right that I should go. Now I have something to ask of you, that you will not follow me, as it is in your heart to do. But last night I prayed of you to dog my steps, and wherever I might go, to keep close to me, that the knowledge of your presence might be my comfort. Now my mind is different. If I must be married to this Urco, I would not have you see me in my shame. And if I escape marriage, you cannot help me, since I may only do so by death or by taking refuge where you cannot come. Also I have another reason." "What reason, Quilla?" I asked. "This. I ask that you will stop with my father and give him your help in the war that must come. I would see this Urco crushed, but without that help I am sure that the Chancas and the Juncas are too weak to overthrow the Inca might. Remember that if I escape marriage thus, only can you hope to win me, namely by the defeat and death of Urco. Say then that you will stay here and help to lead the Chanca armies, and say it swiftly, since that dotard Upanqui frets to be gone. Hark, his messengers call and search. My women can hold them back no more." "I will stay," I answered hoarsely. "I thank you. And now farewell, till in life or death we meet again. Thoughts come to my mind which I have no time to utter." "To mine also, Quilla, and here is one of them. You know the man who was with me on the island. Well, he is more than he seems." "So I guessed, but where is he now?" "In hiding, Quilla. If you should chance to find him, bear in mind that he is an enemy of Urco, and not friendless. Also that he loves me after his fashion. Trust him, I pray you. Urco is not the only one of the Inca blood, Quilla." She glanced at me quickly and nodded her head. Then, without more words, for officers were pressing towards us, she drew a ring off her finger, a thick and ancient golden ring, on which were cut what looked like flowers or images of the sun, and gave it to me. "Wear this for my sake. It is very old and has a story of true love that I have no time to tell," she said. I took it, and in exchange passed to her that ancient ring which my mother had given to me, the ring that had come down to her with the sword Waveflame, saying, "This too is old and has a story. Wear it in memory of me." Then we parted, and presently she was gone. I stood watching her litter till it vanished in the evening haze. Then I turned to go, to find myself face to face with Huracha. "Lord from the sea," he said, "you have played a man's, or a god's, part today. Had you bidden my daughter bide here, she would have done so for love of you, and the Chanca people must have been destroyed. Or, as that old Inca or his spokesman told us, the breaking of my oath would have been taken as a declaration of instant war. Now we have breathing time, and in the end things may go otherwise." "Yes," I answered, "but what of Quilla, and what of me?" "I know not your creed, or what with you is honour, White Lord. But among us whom perhaps you think of small account, it is thought and held that there are times when a man or a woman, especially if they be highly placed, must do sacrifice for the good of the many who cling to them for guidance and for safety. This you and my daughter have done, and therefore I honour both of you." "To what end is the sacrifice made?" I asked bitterly. "That one people may struggle for dominion over another people, no more?" "You are mistaken, Lord. Not for victory or to increase my dominions do I desire to war upon the Incas, but because unless I strike I shall presently be struck. though for a little while this marriage might hold back the blow. Alone in the midst of the vast territories over which the Incas rule, the Chancas stem their tide of conquest, and remain free amongst many nations of slaved. Therefore for ages these Incas, like those who ruled before them at Cuzco, have sworn to destroy us, and Urco has sworn it above all. Urco might die or be deposed, Horatia. If so, another would put on the fringe, and be vowed to the ancient policy that does not change from generation to generation. Therefore I must fight or perish with my people. Hearken, Lord from the Sea, stay here with me and become as my brother, and a general of my armies. For where will they not follow when you lead, who are held to be a god? Then if we conquer, in reward, from a brother you shall become a son, and to you after me I swear shall pass the Chanca crown. Moreover, to you, if she can be saved, I will give in marriage her whom you love. Think before you refuse. I know not whence you come, but this I know, that you can return thither no more, unless indeed you are a spirit. Here your lot is cast till death. Therefore make it glorious. Perchance you might fly to the Inca, and there become a marvel and a show, furnished with gold and palaces and lands, but always you would be a servant, while I offer to you a crown and the rule of a people, great and free. I care nothing for crowns, I answered, sighing. Still, such was Quilla's prayer, perchance the last that ever she will make to me. Therefore I accept, and will serve you and your cause, that seems noble, faithfully to the end, O Horatia. Then I stretched out my hand to him, and so our compact was sealed. On the very next day my work began. Horatia made me known to his captains, commanding them to obey me in all things, which, looking on me as half divine, they did readily enough. Now of soldiering I knew little, who was a seaman bred, yet, as I had learned, a man of the English race, in however strange a country he finds himself, can make a path there to his end. Moreover, in London I had heard much talk of armies and their ordering, and often watched troops at their exercise. Also I know how to handle bow and sword, and was accustomed to the management of men. So putting all these memories together, I set myself to the task of running a mob of half-savage fellows with arms into an ordered host. I created regiments and officered them with the best captains that I could find, collecting in each regiment, so far as possible, the people of a certain town or district. These companies I drilled and exercised, teaching them to use such weapons as they had, to the best purpose. Also I caused them to shape stronger bows on the model of my own, with which I had shot the 3 Frenchmen far away at Hastings, that, as it was said, once had been the battle bow of Thorgrimr, the Norseman, my ancestor, as the sword Wave-Flame was his battle sword. When these Chancas saw how far and with what a good aim I could shoot with this bow, they strove day and night to learn to equal me, though it is true they never did. Also I bettered their body armour of quilting by setting sheets of leather, since in that country there is no iron, taken from the hides of wild animals and of their long-haired native sheep, between the layers of cotton. Other things I did also, too many and long to record. The end of it was that within 3 months Horatia had an army of some 50,000 men, who, if not well trained, still kept discipline, and could move in regiments, who knew also how to shoot with their bows, and to use their copper-headed spears and axes of that metal, or of hard stone, to the best purpose. Then at length came the Junkers to join us, 30 or 40,000 of them, wild fellows and brave enough, but undisciplined. With these I could do little, since time was lacking, save send some of the officers whom I had trained to teach their chiefs and captains what they were able. Thus I was employed from dawn till dark, and often after it, in talk with Horatia and his generals, or in drawing plans with ink that I found a means to make upon parchment of sheepskin, and noting down numbers and other things, a sight at which these people who knew nothing of writing marvelled very much. Great were my labours, yet in them I found more happiness than I had known since that fatal day when I, the rich London merchant Hubert of Hastings, had stood before the altar of St. Margaret's Church with Blanche. Indeed, every cranny of my time and mind being thus filled with things finished or attempted, I forgot my great loneliness as an alien in a strange land, and once more became as I had been when I trafficked in the cheap. But, toil as I would, I could not forget Quilla. During the day I might mask her memory in its urgent business, but when I lay down to rest she seemed to come to me as a ghost might do, and to stand by my bed, looking at me with sad and longing eyes. So real was her presence that sometimes I began to believe that she must have died to the world, and was in truth a ghost, or else that she had found the power to throw her soul afar, as it is said certain of these Indian folk, if so they should be called, can do. At least there she seemed to be while I remained awake, and afterwards when I slept, and I know not whether her strange company joyed or pained me more. For alas, she could not talk to me, or tell me how it fared with her, and, to speak truth, now that she was the wife of another man, as I supposed, I desired to forget her if I could. For of Quilla no word reached us. We heard that she had come safely to Cuzco, and after that nothing more. Of her marriage there was no tidings. Indeed, she seemed to have vanished away. Certain of Horatia's spies reported to him, however, that the great army which Urco had gathered to attack him had been partly disbanded, which seemed to show that the Inca no longer prepared for immediate war. Only then, what had happened to Quilla, whose person was the price of peace? Perhaps she was hidden away during the preparations for her nuptials. At least I could think of nothing else, unless indeed she had chosen to kill herself or died naturally. Soon, however, all news ceased, for Horatia shut his frontiers, hoping that thus Urco might not learn that he was gathering armies. At length, when our forces were almost ready to march, Kari came, Kari whom I thought lost. One night, when I was seated at my work by lamplight, writing down numbers upon a parchment, a shadow fell across it, and looking up I saw Kari standing before me, travel-worn and weary, but Kari without doubt, unless I dreamed. "Have you food, lord?" he asked, while I stared at him. "I need it, and would eat before I speak." I found meat and native beer and brought them to him, for it was late and my servants were asleep, waiting till he had filled himself, for by this time I had learned something of the patience of these people. At length he spoke, saying, "Horatia's watch is good, and to pass it I must journey far into the mountains and sleep 3 nights without food amid their snows." "Whence come you?" I asked. "From Cusco, lord." "Then what of the Lady Quilla? Does she still live? Is she wed to Urco?" "She lives, or lived 14 days ago, and she is not wed. But where she is no man may ever come. You have looked your last upon the Lady Quilla, lord." "If she lives and is unwed, why?" I asked, trembling. "Because she is numbered among the virgins of the Sun, our father, and therefore inviolate to man. Were I the Inca, though I love you and know all, should you attempt to take her, yes, even you, I would kill you if I could, and with my own sword. In our land, lord, there is one crime which has no forgiveness, and that is to lay hands upon a virgin of the sun. We believe, lord, that if this is done, great curses will fall upon our country, while as for the man who works the crime, before he passes to eternal vengeance, he and all his house, and the town whence he came, must perish utterly, and that false virgin who has betrayed our father, the sun, must die slowly and by fire." "Has this ever chanced?" I asked. "History does not tell it, lord, since none have been so wicked, but such is the law." I thought to myself that it was a very evil law, and cruel, also that I would break it if I found opportunity, but made no answer, knowing when to be silent, and that I might as well strive to move a mountain from its base as to turn Kari from the blindness of his folly, bred of false faith. After all, could I blame him, seeing that we held the same of the sacredness of nuns, and, it was said, killed them if they broke their vows? "What news, Kari?" I asked. "Much, lord. Hearken. Disguised as a peasant who had come into this country to barter wool from a village near to Cuzco, I joined myself to the train of the Inca Upanqui, among whose lords I found a friend who had loved me in past years, and kept my secret as he was bound to do, having passed into the Brotherhood of Knights with me while we were lads. Through him, in place of a man who was sick, I became one of the bearers of the Lady Quilla's litter, and thus was always about her, and at times had speech with her in secret, for she knew me again notwithstanding my disguise and uniform. So I became one of those who waited on her when she ate, and noted all that passed. After the first day the Inca Upanqui, he who is my father, and whose lawful heir I am, although he discarded me for Urco, and believes me dead, made it a habit to take his food in the same tent or rest-house chamber as the Lady Quilla. Lord, being very clever, she set herself to charm him, so that soon he began to dote upon her, as old worn-out men sometimes do upon young and beautiful women. She too pretended to grow fond of him, and at last told him, in so many words, that she grieved it was not he that she was to marry, whose wisdom she hung upon, in place of a prince who, she heard, was not wise. This, she said, because she knew well that the Inca would never marry any more, and indeed had lived alone for years. Still, being flattered, he told her it was hard that she should be forced to wed one to whom she had no mind, whereon she prayed him, even with tears, to save her from such a fate. At last he vowed that he would do so by setting her among the virgins of the sun, on whom no man may look. She thanked him, and said that she would consider the matter, since, for reasons that you may guess, lord, she did not desire to become a virgin of the sun, and to pass the rest of her days in prayer and the weaving of the Inca's garments. So it went on, until when we were a day's march from Cuzco, Urco, my brother, came to meet his promised bride. Now Urco is a huge man, and hideous, one whom none would believe to have been born of the Inca blood. Coarse he is, and dissolute, given to drink also, though a great fighter, and brave in battle, and quick-brained when he is sober. I was present when they met, and I saw the Lady Quilla shiver and turn pale at the sight of him, while he, on his part, devoured her beauty with his eyes. They spoke but few words together, yet before these were done, he told her it was his will that they should be wed at once on the day after she came to Cuzco, nor would he listen to the Inca Upanqui, who said, being cunning and wishing to gain time, that due preparation must be made for so great a business. Thereupon Urco grew angry with his father, who both fears and loves him, and answered that, being almost Inca, this matter was one which he would settle for himself. So fierce was he that Upanqui became afraid and went away. When they were alone, Urco strove to embrace Quilla, but she fled from him and hid with her maidens in a private place. After this, at the feast, Urco took too much drink, according to his custom, and was led away to sleep by his lords. Then Quilla waited upon the Inca, and said, "O Inca, I have seen the prince, and I claim your promise to save me from him. O Inca, abandoning all thought of marriage, I will become the bride of our father, the sun." Upanqui, who was wroth with Urco, because he had crossed his will, swore by the sun itself that he would not fail her, come what might. since Urco should learn that he was not yet Inca." "What happened then?" I asked, staring him in the eyes. "After this, Lord, when we were halted before making the state entry into Cuzco, for a moment the Lady Quilla found opportunity for private speech with me. This is what she said. 'Tell my father, King Huracha, that I have fulfilled his oath, but that I cannot marry Urco. Therefore I seek refuge in the arms of the sun, as the oracle Rimac foretold that I should do, having to choose between this fate and that of death. Tell my lord from the sea what has befallen me, and bid him farewell to me. Still say that he must keep a good heart, since I do not believe that all is ended between us.' Then we were parted, and I saw her no more." "And did you hear no more, Kari?" "I heard much, Lord. I heard that when Urco learned that the Lady Quilla had vanished away into the house of virgins, whither he might not come, and that he was robbed of the bride whom he desired, he grew mad with rage. Indeed, of this I saw something myself. 2 days later, with thousands of others, I was in the great square in front of the Temple of the Sun, where the Inca Upanqui sat in state upon a golden throne to receive the praise of his people upon his safe return after his long and hard journey, and, as some reported, to lay down his lordship in favour of Urco, also to tell the people that the danger of war with the Chancas had passed away. Scarcely had the ceremony begun when Urco appeared at the head of a number of lords and princes of the Inca blood, who are of his clan, and I noticed that he was drunk and furious. He advanced to the foot of the throne, almost without obeisance, and shouted, 'Where is the Lady Quilla, daughter of Huracha, who is promised to me in marriage, Inca? Why have you hidden her away, Inca?' 'Because the sun, our father, has claimed her as his bride, and has taken her to dwell in his holy house, where never again may the eyes of man behold her, Prince,' answered Upanqui. 'You mean that, robbing me, you have taken her for yourself, Inca?' shouted Urco again. Then Upanqui stood up and swore by the sun that this was not so, and that what he had done was done by the decree of the god, and at the prayer of the Lady Quilla, who, having seen Urco, had declared that either she would be wed to the god or die by her own hand, which would bring the vengeance of the sun upon the people. Then Urco went mad. He raved at the Inca, and while all present shivered with fear, he cursed the sun, our father. Yes, even when a cloud came up in the clear sky and veiled the face of the god, heedless of the omen, he continued his curses and blasphemy. Moreover, he said that soon he would be Inca, and that then, if he must tear the house of virgins stone from stone, as Inca, he would drag forth the Lady Quilla and make her his wife. Now at these words Upanqui stood up and rent his robes. 'Must my ears be outraged with such blasphemies?' he cried. 'Know, son Urco, that this day I was minded to take off the royal fringe and to set it on your head, crowning you Inca in my place, while I withdrew to pass the remainder of my days at UK in peace and prayer. My will is changed, this I shall not do. My life is not done, and strength returns to my mind and body. Here I stay as Inca. Now I see that I am punished for my sin.' 'What sin?' shouted Urco. 'The sin of setting you before my eldest lawful son, Kari, whose wife you stole, Kari, whom also it is said you poisoned, and who at least has vanished and is doubtless dead. Now, Lord, when I, Kari, heard this, my heart melted in me, and I was minded to declare myself to Upanqui, my father. But while I weighed the matter for a moment, knowing that if I did so, such words as these might well be my last, since Urco had many of his following present, who perhaps would fall upon me and kill me, suddenly my father Upanqui fell forward in a swoon. His lords and physicians bore him away. Urco followed, and presently the multitude departed this way and that. Afterwards we were told that the Inca had recovered, but must not be disturbed for many days." "Did you hear more of Quilla, Kari?" "Yes, lord," he answered gravely. "It was commonly reported that, through some priestess in his pay, Urco had poisoned her, saying that as she had chosen the sun as husband, to the sun she would go." "Poisoned her?" I muttered, well nigh falling to the ground. "Poisoned her?" "Aye, lord, but be comforted, for this was added, that she who gave the poison was taken in the act by her who is named the Mother of the Virgins, and handed over to the women who cast her into the den of serpents, where she perished, screaming that it was Urco who had forced her to the deed." "That does not comfort me, man. What of Quilla? Did she die?" "Lord, it is said not. It is said that the Mother of the Virgins dashed away the cup as it touched her lips, but this is said also, that some of the poison flew into her eyes and blinded her." I groaned, for the thought of Quilla blinded was horrible. "Again, take comfort, lord, since perchance she may recover from this blindness. Also I was told that although she can see nothing, her beauty is not marred, that the venom indeed has made her eyes seem larger, and more lovely even than they were before." I made no answer, who feared that Kari was deceiving me, or perhaps was himself deceived, and that Quilla was dead. Presently he continued his story, in the same quiet, even voice, saying, "Lord, after this I sought out certain of my friends who had loved me in my youth, and my mother also while she lived, revealing myself to them. We made plans together, but before aught could be done in earnest, it was needful that I should see my father Upanqui. While I was waiting till he had recovered from the stroke that fell upon him, some spy betrayed me to Urco, who searched for me to kill me, and well nigh found me. The end of it was that I was forced to fly, though before I did so, many swore themselves to my cause, who would escape from the tyranny of Urco. Moreover, it was agreed that if I returned with soldiers at my back, they and their followers would come out to join me to the number of thousands, and help me to take my own again, so that I may be Inca after Upanqui my father. Therefore I have come back here to talk with you and Huarcha. Such is my tale." The end of Book 2, Chapter 7. Recording by Andy Thames. Book 2, Chapter 8. Of the Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Field of Blood. When on the morrow Huarcha, king of the Chancas, heard all this story, and that Urco had given poison to his daughter Quilla, who, if she still lived at all, did so, it was said, as a blind woman, a kind of madness took hold of him. "Now let war come. I will not rest or stay," he cried, "till I see this hound Urco dead, and hang up his skin, stuffed with straw as an offering to his own god the sun." "Yet it was you, King Huarcha, who sent the Lady Quilla to this Urco, for your own purposes," said Kari in his quiet fashion. "Who, and what are you to reprove me?" asked Huarcha, turning on him. "I only know you as the servant or slave of the White Lord from the sea, though it is true I have heard stories concerning you," he added. "I am Kari, the firstborn lawful son of Upanqui, and by right heir to the Inca throne, no less. O Huarcha, Urco, my brother, robbed me of my wife, as through the folly of my father, upon whose heart Urco's mother worked, he had already robbed me of my inheritance. Then, to make sure, he strove to poison me, as he has poisoned your daughter, with a poison that would make me mad and incapable of rule, yet leave me living, because he feared lest the curse of the sun should fall upon him if he murdered me. I recovered from that bane and wandered to a far land. Now I have returned to take my own, if I am able. All that I say I can prove to you." For a while Huarcha stared at him astonished, then said, "And if you prove it, what do you ask of me, O Kari?" "The help of your armies, to enable me to overthrow Urko, who is very strong, being the commander of the Quichua hosts." "And if your tale be true and Urko is overthrown, what do you promise me in return?" "The independence of the Shanka people, who otherwise must soon be destroyed, and certain other added territories which you covet, while I am Inca." "And with this, my daughter, if she still lives?" asked Horatia, looking at him. "Nay," replied Kari firmly. "As to the Lady Quilla, I promise nothing. She has vowed herself to my father the sun, and what I have already told the Lord Horachi here, who loves her, I tell you. Henceforward no man may look upon her, who is the bride of the sun. For if I suffered this, certainly the curse of the sun would fall upon me and upon my people. He who lays a hand upon her I will strive to slay." Here he looked at me with meaning. "Because I must, or be accursed. Take all else, but let the Lady Quilla be. What the sun has, he holds forever." "Perhaps the moon, her mother, may have something to say in that matter," said Horatia gloomily. "Still, let it lie for the while." Then they fell to discussing the terms of their alliance, and, when it came to battle, what help Kari could bring from among those who clung to him in Cuzco. After this Horatia took me to another chamber, where we debated the business. "This Kari, if he be Kari himself, is a bigot," he said, "and if he has his way, neither you nor I will ever set eyes on Quilla again, because to him it is sacrilege. So what say you?" I answered that it would be best to make an alliance with Kari, whom I knew to be honest and no pretender, since without his help I did not think that it would be possible to defeat the armies of the people of the Incas. For the rest, we must trust to chance, making no promises as to Quilla. "If we did, they would avail little," said Horatia, "seeing that without doubt she is dead, and only vengeance remains to us. There is more poison in Cuzco, white lord." 8 days later we were marching on Cuzco, a great host of us, numbering at least 40,000 Chancas and 25,000 of the rebellious Yuncas who had joined our standard. On we marched by the great road over mountains and across plains, driving with us numberless herds of the native sheep for food, but meeting no man, since so soon as we were out of the territory of the Chancas, all fled at our approach. At length one night we camped upon a hill named Carmenca, and saw beneath us, at a distance, the mighty city of Cuzco, standing in a valley through which a river ran. There it was, with its huge fortresses built of great blocks of stone, its temples, its palaces, its open squares, and its countless streets bordered by low houses. Moreover, beyond and around it, we saw other things, namely the camps of a vast army, dotted with thousands of white tents. "Urko is ready for us," said Kari to me grimly as he pointed to these tents. We camped upon the hill Carmenca, and that night there came to us an embassy which spoke in the names of Upanqui and Urko, as though they reigned jointly. This embassy of great lords, who all wore discs of gold in their ears, asked us what was our purpose. Horatia answered, to avenge the murder of the Lady Quilla, his daughter, that he heard had been poisoned by Urko. "How know you that she is dead?" asked the spokesman. "If she is not dead," replied Horatia, "show her to us." "That may not be," replied the spokesman, "since if she lives it is in the house of the Virgins of the Sun, whence none come out and where none go in. Hearken, O Horatia, go back whence you came, or the countless armies of the Incas will fall upon you and destroy you, you and your handful together." "That is yet to be seen," answered Horatia, and without more words the embassy withdrew. That night also men crept into our camp secretly, who were of the party of Kari. Of Quilla they seemed to know nothing, for none spoke of those over whom the veil of the sun had fallen. They told us, however, that the old Inca Upanqui was still in Cuzco, and had recovered somewhat from his sickness. Also they said that now the feud between him and Urco was bitter, but that Urco had the upper hand, and was still in command of the armies. These armies, they declared, were immense, and would fight us on the morrow, adding, however, that certain regiments of them, who were of the party of Kari, would desert to us in the battle. Lastly, they said that there was great fear in Cuzco, since none knew how that battle would end, which was understood by all to be one for the dominion of Tuatsinsuya. They had nothing more to say, except that they prayed the sun for our success to save them from the tyranny of Urco. This prince, it appeared, suspected their conspiracy, for now the rumour that Kari lived was everywhere, and having obtained the names of some who were connected with it through his spies, he pursued them with murder and sudden death. They were poisoned at their food, they were stabbed as they walked through the streets at night. Their wives, if young and fair, vanished away, as they believed, into the houses of those who desired them. Even their children were kidnapped, doubtless to become the servants of whom they knew not. They had complained of these things to the old Inca Upanqui, but without avail, since in such matters he was powerless before Urco, who had command of the armies. Therefore they would even welcome the triumph of Huracha, which meant that Kari would become Inca, if with lessened territory. Before they parted to play their parts, Kari brought them before me, whom in their foolishness they worshipped, believing me to be in truth a god. Then he told them to have no fear, since I would command the armies of Huracha in the battle. Having surveyed the ground while the light lasted for the most of that night, together with Huracha and Kari, I toiled, making plans for the great fight that was to come. All being ready, I lay down to sleep a while, wondering whether it were the last time I should do so upon the earth, and, to tell the truth, not caring overmuch, who, believing that Quilla was dead, had it not been for my sins which weighed upon me, with none to whom I might confess them, should have been glad to leave the world and its troubles, for whatever might lie beyond, even if it were but sleep. There comes a time to most men when above everything they desire rest, and now that hour was with me, the exiled and the desolate. Here in this strange country and among these alien people I had found one soul which was akin to mine, that of a beautiful woman who loved me and whom I had come to love and desire. But what was the end of it? Owing to the necessities of statecraft and her own nobleness, she had been separated from me, and although, as it would seem, she had as yet escaped defilement, was spirited away into the temple of some barbarous worship, where I was almost sure death had found her. At the best she was blinded, and where she lay in her darkness no man might come because of the superstitions of these folk. Even if Kari became Inca, it would not help me or her, should she still live, since he was the fiercest bigot of them all, and swore that he would kill me, his friend, rather than that I should touch her, the vowed to his false gods. Or perhaps through the priest, to save himself such sorrow, he would kill her. At the least, dead or not, she was lost to me, while I, utterly alone, must fight for a cause in which I had but one concern, to bring some savage prince to his end because of his crime against Quilla. And if things went well, and this chanced, what of the future? Of what use to me were rewards that I did not want, and the worship of the vulgar which I hated? Rather would I have lived out my life as the humblest fisherman on Hastings beach, than be made a king over these glittering barbarians, with their gold and gems which could buy nothing that I needed, not even a book of hours to feed my soul. or the sound of the English tongue to comfort my empty heart. At length I fell asleep, and as it seemed but a few minutes later, though really 6 hours had gone by, was awakened by Kari, who told me that the dawn was not far off, and came to help me to buckle on my armour. Then I went forth, and together with Horatia arranged our army for battle. Our plan was to advance from our rising ground across the great plain beneath us, which was called Zaqui, but afterwards became known by the name of Jaguar Pampa, or Field of Blood. This plain lay between us and the city of Cuzco, and my thought was that we would march or fight our way across it, and rush into the city, which was unwalled, and there amidst its streets and houses await the attack of the Inca hosts that were encamped upon its farther side, for thus protected by their walls we hoped that we should be more equal to them. Yet things happened otherwise, since with the first flight, without which we did not dare to move over unknown ground, we perceived that during the darkness the Inca armies had moved round and through the town, and were gathered by the 10,000 in dense battalions upon the farther side of the plain. Now we took counsel together, and in the end decided not to attack as we had proposed, but to await their onslaught on the rocky ridge up which they must climb. So we commanded that our army, which was marshalled in 3 divisions abreast, and 2 wings with the yunkers as a reserve behind, should eat and make ready. In the centre of our main division, which numbered some 15,000 of the Chanka troops, and a little in front of it, was a low, long hill, upon the highest point of which I took my place, standing upon a rock with a group of captains and messengers behind me, and a guard of about 1,000 picked men massed upon the slopes and around the hill. From this high point I could see everything, and in my glittering armour was visible to all, friends and foes together. After a pause, during which the priests of the Shankas and of the Yuncas behind us sacrificed sheep to the moon and the many other gods they worshipped, and those of the Chinquas, as I could see from my rock, made prayers and offerings to the rising sun. With a mighty shouting the Inca host began to advance across the plain towards us. Reckoning them with my eye, I saw that they outnumbered us by 2 or 3 to 1. Indeed, their hordes seemed to be countless, and always more of them came on behind from the dim recesses of the city. Divided into 3 great armies, they crept across the plain, a wild and gorgeous spectacle, the sunlight shining upon the forest of their spears and on their rich barbaric uniforms. A furlong or more away they halted and took counsel, pointing to me with their spears as though they feared me. We stood quite still, though some of our generals urged that we should charge, but this I counselled Horatia not to do, who desired that the Quichuas should break their strength upon us. At length some word was given, the splendid rainbow banner of the Incas was unfurled, and, still divided into 3 armies with a wide stretch of plain between each of them, they attacked, yelling like all the fiends of hell. Now they had reached us, and there began the most terrible battle that was told of in the history of that land. Wave after wave of them rolled up against us, but our battalions, which I had not trained in vain, stood like rocks and slew and slew and slew till the dead could be counted by the thousands. Again and again they strove to storm the hill on which I stood, hoping to kill me, and each time we beat them back. Picking out their generals, I loosed shaft after shaft from my long bow, and seldom did I miss, nor could their cotton-quilted armour turn those bitter arrows. "The shafts of the god! The shafts of the god!" they cried, and shrank back from before me. There appeared a man with a yellow fillet on his head, and a robe that was studded with precious stones, a huge man with great limbs and flaming eyes, a loose-mouthed, hideous man, who wielded a big axe of copper, and carried a bow longer than any I had seen in that land. Hooking the axe to his belt, he set an arrow on the bow, and let drive at me. It sped true, and struck me full upon the breast, only to shatter on the good French mail, which copper could not pierce. Again he shot, and this time the arrow glanced from my helm, Then I drew on him, and my shaft, that I had aimed at his head, cut away the fringe about his brow, and carried it far away. At this sight a groan went up from the lords about him, and one cried, "An omen, O Urco, an evil omen!" "Aye," he shouted, "for the white wizard who shot the arrow." Dropping the bow, he rushed up the hill at me, roaring, axe aloft, and followed by his company. He smote, and I caught the blow upon my shield, and striking back with wave-flame, shore through the shaft of the axe that he had lifted to guard his head, as though it had been made of reed, aye, and through the quilted cotton on his shoulder, strengthened with strips of gold, and to the bone beneath. Then a man slipped past me. It was Kari, striking at Urco with Delroy's sword. They closed and rolled down the slope, locked in each other's arms. What chanced after this I do not know, for others rushed in, and all grew confused. But presently Kari limped back, somewhat shaken and bleeding, and I caught sight of Urco, little hurt, as it seemed, amidst his lords at the bottom of the slope. At this moment I heard a great shouting, and looking round, saw that the Quichuas had broken through our left, and were slaughtering many, while the rest fled. Also that our right was wavering. I sent messengers to Huracha, bidding him call up the Yunka rearguard. They were slow in coming, and I began to fear that all was lost, for little by little the hordes of men of the Cusco were surrounding us. Then it was that Kari, or some with him, lifted a banner that had been wrapped upon a pole, a blue banner, upon which was embroidered a golden sun. At the sight of it there was tumult in the Inca ranks, and presently a great body of men, 5,000 or 6,000 of them, that had seemed to be in reserve, ran forward shouting, "Kari, Kari," and fell upon those who were pursuing our shattered left, breaking them up and dispersing them. Also at last the Juncas came up, and drove back the regiments that assailed our right, while from Urco's armies there rose a cry of "Treachery!" Trumpets blew, and the Inca host, gathering itself together and abandoning its dead and wounded, drew back sullenly onto the plain, and there halted in 3 bodies as before, though much lessened in number. Huracha appeared, saying, "Strike, white lord! It is our hour! The heart is out of them!" The signal was given, and roaring like a hurricane, presently the Chancas charged. Down the slope they went, I at the head of them, with Huracha on one side and Kari on the other. The swift-footed Chancas outran me, who was hindered by my mail. We charged in 3 masses, as we had stood on the ridge, following those open lanes of ground, up which the foe had not come, because these were less cumbered with dead and wounded. Presently I saw why those of Cusco had left these lanes untrod, for of a sudden some warriors, who had outstripped me, vanished. They had fallen into a pit, covered over with earth laid upon canes, of which the bottom was set with sharp stakes. Others, who were running along the lanes of open ground to right and left, also fell into pits, of which there were scores, all carefully prepared against the day of battle. With trouble the Chancas were halted, but not before we had lost some hundreds of men. Then we advanced again across that ground over which the Inca host had retreated. At length we reached their lines, passing through a storm of arrows, and there began such a battle as I had never heard of or even dreamed. With axes, stone-headed clubs and spears, both armies fought furiously, and though the Inca still outnumbered us 2 to 1, because of my training our regiments drove them back. Lord after lord rushed at me with glaring eyes, but my mail turned their copper spears and knives of flint. Oh, Waveflame fed full that day, and if Thorgrimr, my forefather, could have seen us from his home in Valhalla, surely he must have sworn by Odin that never had he given it such a feast. The Inca warriors grew afraid and shrank back. "This Redbeard from the sea is indeed a god. He cannot be slain," I heard them cry. Then Urco appeared, bloody and furious, shouting, "Cowards! I will show you whether he cannot be slain." He rushed onward to meet, not me, but Huracha, who, seeing that I was weary, had leapt in front of me. They fought, and Huracha went down, and was dragged away by some of his servants. Now Urco and I were face to face, he wielding a huge copper-headed club, with which, as my mail could not be pierced, he thought to batter out my life. I caught the blow upon my shield, but so great was the giant's strength that it brought me to my knees. Next second I was up and at him. Shouting, I smote with both hands, for my shield had fallen. The thick turban-like headdress that Urco wore was severed, cut through as the axe had been, and Wayflame bit deep into the skull beneath. Urco fell like a stunned ox, and I sprang upon him to make an end. Then it was that a rope was flung about my shoulders, a noosed rope that was hauled tight. In vain I struggled. I was thrown down. I was seized by a score of hands and dragged away into the heart of Urco's host. Waiting till a litter could be brought, they set me on my feet again, my arms still bound by the noose that these Indians call lasso, which they know so well how to throw, the red sword Wayflame still hanging by its thong from my right wrist. Whilst I stood thus like a bull in a net, they gathered round, staring at me, not with hate, as it seemed to me, but in fear and with reverence. When at length the litter came, they aided me to enter it quite gently. As I did so, I looked back. The battle still raged, but it seemed to me with less fury than before. It was as though both sides were weary of slaughter, their leaders being fallen. The litter was borne forward, till at length the noise of shouting and tumult grew low. Twisting myself round, I peered through the back curtains, and saw that the Inca host and that of the Chancas were separating sullenly, neither of them broken, since they carried their wounded away with them. It was plain that the battle remained drawn, for there was no rout and no triumph. I saw, too, that I was entering the great city of Cuzco, where women and children stood at the doors of the houses, gazing, and some of them wringing their hands with tears upon their faces. Passing down long streets and across a bridge, I came to a vast square, round which stood mighty buildings, low, massive, and constructed of huge stones. At the door of one of these the litter halted, and I was helped to descend. Men, beautifully clad in broidered linen, led me through a gateway and across a garden, where I noted a marvellous thing, namely, that all the plants therein were fashioned of solid gold with silver flowers, or sometimes of silver with golden flowers. Also there were trees on which were perched birds of gold and silver. When I saw this I thought that I must be mad, but it was not so, for having no other use for the precious metals, of which they had so much abundance, thus did these Incas adorn their palaces. Leaving the golden garden, I reached a courtyard surrounded by rooms, to one of which I was conducted. Passing its door, I found myself in a splendid chamber, hung with tapestries fantastically wrought, and having cushioned seats and tables of rich woods, encrusted with precious stones. Here servants or slaves appeared with a chamberlain, who bowed deeply and welcomed me in the name of the Inca. Then, as though I were something half divine, gently enough, they loosed the sword from my wrist, took the long bow from my back with the few arrows that remained, also my dagger, and hid them away. They unbound me, and freeing me from my armour, as I told them how, and the garments beneath, laved me with warm scented water, rubbed my bruised limbs, and clothed me in wonderful soft garments, also scented, and fastened about my middle with a golden belt. This done, food and spiced drinks of their native wine were brought to me in golden vessels. I ate and drank, and being very weary, laid myself down upon one of the couches to sleep. For now I no longer took any thought as to what might befall me, but received all as it came, good and ill together, entrusting my body and soul to the care of God and St. Hubert. Indeed, what else could I do, who was disarmed and a prisoner? When I awoke again, very stiff and bruised, but much refreshed, night had fallen, for hanging lamps were lit about the room. By their light I saw the chamberlain of whom I have spoken, standing before me. I asked him his errand. With many bows he said that if I were rested, the Inca Opanqui desired my presence that he might speak with me. I bade him lead on, and, with others who waited without, he conducted me through a maze of passages into a glorious chamber, where everything seemed to be gold, for even the walls were panelled with it. Never had I dreamt of so much gold. Indeed, the sight of it wearied me, till I could have welcomed that of humble brick or wood. At the end of this chamber, that was also lit with lamps, were curtains. Presently these were drawn by two beautiful women in jewelled skirts and headdresses, and behind them, on a dais, I saw a couch, and on the couch the old Inca Upanqui, looking feebler than when I had last beheld him in the Shanka city, and very simply clad in a white tunic. Only on his head he wore the red fringe from which I suppose he never parted day or night. He looked up and said, "Greeting, white lord from the sea. So you have come to visit me after all, though you said that you would not." "I have been brought to visit you, Inca," I answered. "Yes, yes. They tell me they captured you in battle, though I expect that was by your own will, as you had wearied of those chancres. For what lasso can hold a god?" "None," I answered boldly. "Of course not. And that you are a kind of god there is no doubt, because of the things you did in that battle. They say that the arrows and spears melted when they touched you, and that you shot and cut down men by scores. Also that when the Prince Urko tried to kill you, although he is the strongest man in my kingdom, you knocked him over as though he had been a little child, and hacked his head open so that they do not know whether he will live or die. I hope he will die, for you see, I have quarrelled with him." I thought to myself that so did I, but I only asked, "How did the battle end, Inca?" "As it began, Lord Hurachi. A great many men have been killed on both sides, thousands and thousands of them, and neither army has the victory. They have drawn back and sit growling at each other like two angry lions, which are afraid to fight again. Indeed, I do not want them to fight, and now that Urko cannot interfere, I shall put a stop to all this bloodshed if I am able. Tell me, for you were with him, why does this Huracha, who I hear is also wounded, want to make war on me with those troublesome chancres of his?" "Because your son, the Prince Urko, has poisoned or tried to poison his only child, Quilla." "Yes, yes, I know, and it was a wicked thing to do. You see, Lord, what happened was this, that lovely Quilla, who is fairer than her mother the moon, was to have married Urko. But, Lord, as it chanced on our journey together, although I am old, well, she became enamoured of me, and prayed me to protect her from Urko. Such things happen to women, Lord, whose hearts, when they behold the divine, are apt to carry them away from the vulgar." And he laughed in a silly fashion, like the vain old fool that he was. "Naturally. How could she help it, Inca, who, after seeing you, would wish to turn to Urko? No one, especially as Urko is a coarse and brutal fellow. Well, what was I to do? There are reasons why I do not wish to marry again at my age. Indeed, I am tired of the sight of women, who want time to pray and think of holy things. Also, if I had done what she wished, some might have thought that I had behaved badly to Urko. At the same time, a woman's heart is sacred, and I could not do violence to that of one so sweet and understanding and lovely, so I put her into the house of virgins of the sun, where she will be quite safe." "It seems that she was not safe, Inca." "No, because that violent man Urko, being disappointed and jealous, through some low creature of his who waited on the virgins, tried to poison her with a drug which would have made her all swollen and hideous, and covered her face with blotches. Also, perhaps, have sent her mad. Luckily, one of the matrons, whom we call Mamaconas, knocked the cup away before she drank, but some of the horrible poison went into her eyes and blinded her." "So she lives, Inca?" "Certainly she lives. I have learnt that for myself, because in this country it is not wise to trust what they tell you. You know, as Inca I have privileges, and although even I do not talk to them, I cause those virgins of the sun to be led in front of me, which, in strictness, even I ought not to have done." "It was a dreary business, Lord Hurachi. For though those virgins may be so holy, some of them are very old and hideous, and of course Quilla, as a novice, came last in the line, conducted by two Mamaconas, who are cousins of my own. The odd thing is that the poison seems to have made her much more beautiful than before, for her eyes have grown bigger and are glorious, shining like stars seen when there is a frost. Well, there she is safe from Urko, and every other man, however wicked and impious. But what does this Horatio want? He wants his blinded daughter back, Inca. Impossible, impossible. Who ever heard of such a thing? Why, heaven and earth would come together, and the sun, my father, and her husband would burn us all up. Still, perhaps we could come to an agreement, for Horatio must have had enough fighting, and very likely he will die. Now, I am tired of talking about the Lady Quilla, and I want to ask you something. Speak on, Inca. Suddenly the old dotard's manner changed. He became quick and shrewd, as doubtless he was in his prime, for this Upanqui had been a great king. At the beginning of our talk the two women of whom I have spoken, and the chamberlain, had withdrawn to the end of the chamber, where they waited with their hands folded, like those who adore before an altar. Still he peered about him to make sure that none were within hearing, and in the end beckoned me to ascend the dais and sit upon the couch beside him, saying, "You see I trust you, although you are a god from the sea, who has been fighting against me. Now hearken. You had a servant with you, a very strange man, who is said also to have come out of the sea, though that I cannot believe, since he is like one of our princes. Where is that man?" "With the army of Horatio, Inca." "So I have heard. I heard also that in battle he hoisted a banner with the sun blazoned on it, and that thereon certain regiments of mine deserted to Horatio. Now why did they do that?" "I understand, O Inca, that the kings of this land have many children. Perhaps he might be one of them." "Ah, you are clever, as a god should be. Well, I am a god also, and the same thought has come to me, although as a fact I have only had 2 legitimate sons, and the others are of no account. The eldest of these was an able and beautiful prince named Kari, but we quarrelled, and to tell the truth there was a woman in the matter, or rather 2 women, for Kari's mother fought with Urko's mother, whom I loved, because she never scolded me, which the other did. So Urko was named to be Inca after me. Yet that was not enough for him, who remained jealous of his brother Kari, who outpassed him in all things save strength of body. They wooed the same beautiful woman, and Kari won her, whereon Urko seduced her from him, and afterwards he or someone killed her. At least she died, I forget how. Then the lords of the Inca blood began to turn towards Kari, because he was royal and wise, which would have meant civil war when I had been gathered to the sun. Therefore Urko poisoned him, or so it was rumoured at any rate. He vanished away, and often since then I have mourned him." "The dead come to life again sometimes, Inca." Yes, Lord from the sea, that happens. The gods who took them away bring them back. And this servant of yours, they say he is so like to Kari that he might be the same man grown older. And why did those regiments, all of them officered by men who used to love Kari, go over to Horatio today? And why do rumours run through the land like the wind that springs up suddenly in fine weather? Tell me of this servant of yours, and how you found him in the sea." "Why should I tell you, Inca? Is it because you want to kill him who is so like to this lost Kari of yours?" No, gods can keep each other's counsel, can they not? It is because I would give, half my godship to know that he is alive. Hark you, Urko wearies me so much that sometimes I wonder whether he really is my son. Who can tell? There was a certain lord of the coastlands, a hairy giant, who, they said, could eat half a sheep at a sitting, and break the backs of men in his hands, of whom Urko's mother used to think much. But who can tell? No one except my father the sun, and he guards his secrets, for the present. At least Urco wearies me with his coarse crimes and his drunkenness, though the army loves him, because he is a butcher and liberal. He quarrelled the other day over the small matter of this Lady Quilla, and he threatened me till I grew wrath, and said that I would not hand him my crown, as I had purposed to do. Yes, I grew wrath and hated him, for whose sake I had sinned, because his mother bewitched me. Lord from the sea, here his voice dropped to a whisper, I am afraid of Urco. Even a god such as I am can be murdered, Lord from the sea. That is why I will not go to UK, for there I might die and none know it, whereas here I still am Inca, and a god whom it is sacrilege to touch. I understand, but how can I help you, Inca, who am but a prisoner in your palace? No, you are only a prisoner in name. At the worst Urco will be sick for a long while, since the physicians say that sword of yours has bitten deep, and during that time all power is mine. Messengers are at your service, you are free to come and go as you will. Bring this servant of yours to my presence, for doubtless he trusts you. I would speak with him, O Lord from the sea. If I should do this, Inca, will the Lady Quilla be given back to her father? Nay, it would be sacrilege. Ask what else you will, lands and rule and palaces and wives, not that. Myself, I should not dare to lay a finger on her who rests in the arms of the sun. What does it matter about this Quilla, who is but one fair woman among thousands? I thought a while, then answered, I think it matters much, Inca. Still, that this bloodshed may be stayed, I will do my best to bring him who was my servant to your presence, if you can find me the means to come at him, and afterwards we will talk again. Yes, I am weary now. Afterwards we will talk again. Farewell, Lord from the sea. The end of Book 2, Chapter 8. Recording by Andy Thames. Book 2, Chapter 9 of The Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Kari comes to his own. When I awoke on the following morning, in the splendid chamber of which I have spoken, it was to find that my armour and arms had been restored to me, and very glad was I to see Waveflame again. After I had eaten, and, escorted by servants, walked in the gardens, for never could I be left alone, marvelling at the wondrous golden fruits and flowers, a messenger came to me, saying that the Vianora desired speech with me. I wondered who this Vianora might be, but when he entered I saw that he was Larico, that same stern-faced, cunning-eyed lord who had been the spokesman of the Inca when he visited the city of the Chancas. Also I learned that Vianora was his title and meant chief priest. We bowed to each other, and all were sent from the chamber, leaving us quite alone. Lord from the sea, he said, the Inca sends me, his counsellor and blood relative, who am head priest of the sun, to desire that you will go on an embassy for him to the camp of the Chancas. First, however, it is needful that you should swear by the sun that you will return thence to Cuzco. Will you do this? Now, as there was nothing I desired more than to return to Cuzco where Quilla was, I answered that I would swear by my own god, by the sun, and by my sword, unless the Chancas detained me by force. Further, I prayed him to set out his business. He did so in these words. Lord, we have come to know, it matters not how, that the man who appeared with you in this land is no other than Kari, the elder son of the Inca, whom we thought dead. Now it is in the Inca's mind, and in the minds of us, his counsellors, to proclaim the Prince Kari as heir to the throne which soon he would be called upon to fill. But the matter is very dangerous, seeing that Urco still commands the army, and many of the great lords who are of his mother's house cling to him, hoping to receive advancement from him when he becomes Inca. But, priest Larico, Urco, they say, is like to die, and if so, all this trouble will melt like a cloud. Your sword bit deep, lord, but I have it from his physicians that as the brain is uncut he will not die, although he will be sick for a long while. Therefore we must act while he is sick, since it is not lawful to bring about his end, even if he could be come at. Time presses, lord, for as you have seen, the Inca is old and feeble, and his mind is weak. Indeed, at times he has no mind, though at others his strength returns to him. Which means that I deal with you who are the chief priest, and those behind you, I said, looking him in the eyes. That is what it means, lord. Now hearken while I tell you the truth. After the Inca, I am the most powerful man in Tawetsinsuya. Indeed, for the most part, the Inca speaks with my voice, although I seem to speak with his. Yet I am in a snare. Heretofore I have supported Urco because there was no other who could become Inca, although he is a brutal and evil man. Of late, however, since my return from the city of the Chancas, I have quarrelled with Urco, because he has lost that which, the Lady Quilla, whom he desires madly, and lays the blame on me, and it has come to my knowledge that when he succeeds to the throne, it is his purpose to kill me, which doubtless he will do if he can, or, at the least, to cast me from my place and power, which is as bad as death. Therefore I desire to make my peace with Kari, if he will swear to continue me in my office, and this I can only do through you. Bring this peace about, lord, and I will promise you anything you may wish, even perchance to the Incaship itself, should aught happen to Kari, or should he refuse my offers. I think that the Quichuas might welcome a white god from the sea, who has shown himself so great a general, and so brave in battle, and who has knowledge and wisdom more than theirs to rule over them, he added reflectively. Only then, lord, it would be needful to be rid of Kari as well as of Urco. To which I would never consent, I replied, seeing that he is my friend with whom I have shared many dangers. Moreover, I do not wish to be Inca. Is there anything else that you wish very much, lord? A thought came to me yonder at the city of the Chancas. By the way, how lovely is that Lady Quilla, and how royal a woman! It is most strange that she should have turned her mind towards an aged man like Upanqui. We looked at each other. Very strange, I said. It seems to me sad also that this beauteous Quilla should be immured in a nunnery for life. To tell you the truth, High Priest, since it is not good for man to live alone, rather than that such a thing should have happened, I would have married her myself, to which, perchance, she might have consented. Again we looked at each other, and I went on. I hinted as much to Kari after we heard she was numbered amongst the virgins, and asked him whether, should he become Inca, he would take her thence and give her to me. What did he answer, lord? He said that though he loved me like a brother, first he would kill me with his own hand, since such a deed would be sacrilege against the sun. Last night, also, the Inca himself said much the same. Is it so, lord? Well, we priests bring up our Incas to think thus. If we did not, where would our power be, seeing that we are the voice of the sun upon earth, and issue his decrees? But do you always think thus yourselves, O High Priest? Not quite always. There are loopholes in every law of gods and men. For example, I believe I see one in the instance of this Lady Quilla. But before we waste more time in talking, tell me, White Lord, do you desire her? And if so, are you ready to pay me my price? It is that you shall assure to me the friendship of the Prince Kari, should he become Inca, and the continuance of my power and office. My answer is that I do desire this lady, O High Priest, and that if I can, I will obtain from Kari the promise of what you seek. And now, where is the loophole? I seem to remember, Lord, that there is an ancient law which says that none who are maimed may be the wives of the sun. It is true that this law applies to them before they contract the holy marriage. Still, if the point came up before me as High Priest, I might perhaps find that it applied also to those who were maimed after marriage. The case is rare, for which precedents cannot be found, if the search be thorough. Now, through the wickedness of Urco, as it happens, this Lady Quilla has been blinded, and therefore is no longer perfect in her body. Do you understand? Quite, but what would Upanque or Kari say? The Incas, you declare, are always bigots, and might interpret this law otherwise. I cannot tell, Lord, but let us cease from beating bushes. I will help you if I can, if you will help me if you can, though I dare say that in the end you, who are not a bigot, must take the law into your own hands, as perhaps the Lady Quilla, who is a moon-worshipper, would be willing to do also. The finish of it was that this cunning priest and statesman and I made a bargain. If I could win Kari over to his interests, then he swore by the sun that he would gain me access to the Lady Quilla, and help me to fly with her, if so we both wished, while I, on my part, swore to plead his cause with Kari. Moreover, as he showed me, there was little fear that either of us would break these oaths, since henceforth each lay in the power of the other. After this we passed on to public matters. I was charged to offer an honourable truce to Huracha and the Chancas, with permission to them to camp their armies in certain valleys near to Cuzco, where they would be fed until peace was declared, which peace would give them all they needed, namely their freedom and safeguards from attack. For the rest I was to bring Kari and those who had deserted to him on the yesterday into Cuzco, where none would molest them. Then he went, leaving me happier than I had been, since I bade farewell to Quilla. For now at last I saw light, a faint, uncertain light, it was true, only to be reached, if reached at all, through many difficulties and dangers, but still light. At last I had found someone in this land of black superstition who was not a bigot, and who, being the high priest of the sun, knew too much of his god to fear him, or to believe that he should come down to earth and burn it up, should one of the hundreds of his brides seek another husband. Of course this Larico might betray me and Quilla, but I did not think he would, since he had nothing to gain thereby, and might have much to lose, for the reason that I was able, or he thought that I was able, to set Kari against him. At least I could only go forward and trust to fortune, though in fact hitherto she had never shown me favour where woman was concerned. A while later I was being borne in one of the Inca's own litters back to the camp of the Chancas, accompanied by an embassy of great lords. We passed over that dreadful blood-stained plain where, under a flag of truce, both sides were engaged in burying the thousands of their dead, and came to the ridge whence we had charged on the yester-morn. Here sentries stopped us, and I descended from my litter. When the Chancas saw me in my armour come back to them alive, they set up a great shouting, and presently I and the lords with me were led to the pavilion of King Huracha. We found him lying sick upon a couch, for though he showed no wound, he had been badly bruised upon the body by a blow from Urco's club, and, as I feared, was hurt in the bowels. He greeted me with delight, since he thought that I might have been killed after I was captured, and asked how I came to appear in his camp in the company of our enemies. I told him at once what had chanced, and that I was sworn to return to Cuzco when I had done my business. Then the Inca's ambassadors set out their proposals for a truce, and retired, while Huracha discussed them with his generals and Kari, who also was overjoyed to see me safe. The end of it was that they were accepted on the terms offered, namely that Huracha and his army should withdraw to the valleys of which I have spoken, and there camp, receiving all the food they needed until a peace could be offered, such as he would be willing to accept. Indeed, the Chancas were glad to agree to this plan, for their losses in the battle had been very great, and they were in no state to renew the attack upon Cusco, which was still defended by such mighty hordes of brave warriors, fighting for their homes, families, and freedom. So all was agreed on the promise that peace should be made within 30 days or sooner, and that if it were not, the war should recommence. Then privately I told Horatia all that I had learned about Quilla, and that I had still hopes of saving her, though what these were I did not tell him. When he had thought, he said that now the fate of Quilla must be left in the hands of the gods and mine, since not even for her could he neglect the opportunity of an honourable peace, seeing that another battle might mean destruction. Also he pointed out that he was hurt, and I, who had been general under him, was a prisoner, and bound by my oath to return to prison, so that the Chancas had lost their leaders. After this we parted, I promising to work for his cause, and to come to see him again, if I might. These matters finished, I went aside with Kari to a place where none could hear us, and there laid before him the offers of Larico the high priest, showing him how the case stood. Of Quilla, however, I said nothing to him, though it pained me to keep back part of the truth even from Kari. Yet what was I to do, who knew that if I told him all and he became Inca, or the Inca's acknowledged heir, he would work against me because of his superstitious madness, and perhaps cause Quilla to be killed by the priests, as one whose feet were set in the path of sacrilege. So on this matter I held my peace, nor did he ask me anything concerning Quilla, who, I think, wished to hear nothing of that lady, and what had befallen her. When he had learned all, he said, "This may be a trap, lord. I do not trust yonder Larico, who has always been my enemy, and Urco's friend." "I think he is his own friend first," I answered. "Who knows that if Urco recovers, he will kill him, because he has taken the part of your father Upanqui in their quarrels, and suspects him." "I am not sure," said Kari, "yet something must be risked. Did I not tell you when we were sailing down the English river that we must put faith in our gods, yes, afterwards also, and more than once? And did not the gods save us? Well, now again I trust to my God." And drawing out the image of Pachacamac, which he wore around his neck, he kissed it, then, turning, bowed and prayed to the sun. "I will come with you," he said, when he had finished his devotions, "to live, to be Inca, or to die, as the sun decrees." So he came, and with him some of his friends, captains of those who had deserted to him in the battle. But the 5,000 soldiers, or those who were left of them, did not come as yet, because they feared lest they should be set upon and butchered by the regiments of Urco. That night, when we were back safe in Cusco, Kari and the high priest Larico talked together in secret. Of what passed between them he only told me that they had come to an agreement which satisfied them both. Larico said the same to me when next I saw him, adding, "You have kept your word and served my turn, Lord from the Sea. Therefore I will keep mine and serve yours when the time comes. Yet be warned by me, and say nothing of a certain lady to the Prince Kari, since when I spoke a word to him on the matter, hinting that her surrender to her father Horatia would make peace with him more easy and lasting, he answered that first would he fight Horatia and the Yuncas as well, to the last man in Cusco. 'To the sun she has gone,' he said, 'and with the sun she must stay, lest the curse of the sun and of Pachacamac, the spirit above the sun, should fall on me and all of us.' Larico told me also that, fearing something, the great lords who were of Urco's party had borne him away in a litter to a strong city in the mountains, about 5 leagues from Cusco, escorted by thousands of picked men who would stay in and about that city. On the next morning I was summoned to wait upon the Inca Upanqui, and went wearing my armour. I found him in the same great chamber as before, only now he was more royally arrayed, and with him were sundry of his high lords of the Inca blood, also certain priests, among them the Villalona Larico. The old king, who on that day seemed clear in his mind and well, greeted me in his kindly fashion, and bade me set out all that had passed between me and Huracha in the Shanka camp. This I did, only I hid from him how great had been the Shanka losses in the battle, and how glad they were to declare a truce and rest. Upanqui said that the matter should be attended to, speaking in a royal fashion as though it were one of little moment, which showed me how great an emperor he must be. Great he was indeed, seeing that all the broad land of England would have made but one province of his vast dominions, which in every part were filled with people who, unless they chanced to be in rebellion like the Junkers, lived but to do his will. After this, when I thought the audience was ended, a chamberlain advanced to the foot of the throne, and kneeling, said that a suppliant prayed speech with the Inca. Upanqui waved his sceptre, that long staff which I have described, in token that he should be admitted. Then presently up the chamber came Kari, arrayed in the tunic and cloak of an Inca prince, wearing in his ear a disc carved with the image of the sun, and a chain of emeralds and gold about his neck. Nor did he come alone, for he was attended by a brilliant band of those lords and captains who had deserted to him on the day of the great battle. He advanced and knelt before the throne. "Who is this that carries the emblems of the holy blood and is clothed like a prince of the sun?" asked Upanqui, affecting ignorance and unconcern, though I saw the colour mount to his cheeks, and the sceptre shake in his withered hand. "One who is indeed of the holy Inca blood, one sprung from the purest lineage of the sun," answered the stately Kari in his quiet voice. "How then is he named?" asked the Inca again. "He is named Kari, firstborn son of Upanqui, O Inca." "Such a son I had once, but he is long dead, or so they told me," said Upanqui in a trembling voice. "He is not dead, O Inca. He lives, and he kneels before you. Urco poisoned him, but the sun, his father, recovered him, and the spirit that is above all gods supported him. The sea bore him to a far land, where he found a white god who befriended and cared for him." Here he turned his head towards me. "With this god he returned to his own country, and here he kneels before you, O Inca." "It cannot be," said the Inca. "What sign do you bring who name yourself Kari? Show me the image of the spirit above the gods, that from his childhood for generations has been hung about the neck of the Inca's eldest son, born from the queen." Kari opened his robe and drew out that golden effigy of Pachacamac, which he always wore. Upanqui examined it, holding it close to his rheumy eyes. "It seems to be the same," he said, "as I should know upon whose breast it lay until my first son was born. And yet who can be sure, since such things may be copied?" Then he handed back the image to Kari, and after reflecting a while, said, "Bring hither the mother of the royal nurses." Apparently this lady was in waiting, for in a minute she appeared before the throne, an old and withered woman with beady eyes. "Mother," said the Inca, "you were with the Quilla, that is the queen, who has been gathered to the sun when her boy was born, and afterwards nursed him for years. If you saw it, would you know his body again after he has come to middle age?" "Aye, O Inca." "How, mother?" "By 3 moles, O Inca, which we women used to call Yuti, Quilla, and Chaska, that is, the sun, the moon, and the planet Venus, which were the marks of good fortune stamped by the gods upon the prince's back, between the shoulders, set one above the other." "Man who call yourself Kari, are you willing that this old crone should see your flesh?" asked Upanqui. By way of answer, Kari, with a little smile, stripped himself of his broidered tunic and other garments, and stood before us, naked to the middle. Then he turned his back to the mother of the nurses. She hobbled up, and searched it with her bright eyes. "Many scars," she muttered, "scars in front and scars behind. This warrior has known battles and blows. But what have we here? Look, O Inca, Yuti, Quilla, and Chaska, set one above the other, though Chaska is almost hidden by a hurt. Oh, my fosterling! Oh, my prince whom I nursed at these withered breasts! Are you come back from the dead to take your own again? Oh, Kari of the holy blood! Kari the lost who is Kari the found!" Then, sobbing and muttering, she threw her arms about him and kissed him. Nor did he shame to kiss her in return, there before them all. "Restore his garments to the royal prince," said Upanqui, "and bring hither the fringe that is worn by the Inca's heir." It was produced without delay by the high priest Larico, which told me at once that all this scene had been prepared. Upanqui took it from Larico, and beckoning Kari to him, with the priest's help, bound it about his brow, thereby acknowledging him and restoring him as heir apparent to the empire. Then he kissed him on the brow, and Kari knelt down and did his father homage. After this they went away together, accompanied only by Larico and 2 or 3 of the councillors of Inca blood, and, as I learned from Larico afterwards, told each other their tales and made plans to outwit, and if need were to destroy, Urco and his faction. On the following day Kari was established in a house of his own that was more of a fortress than a palace, for it was built of great stones with narrow gates, and surrounded by an open space. Upon this space, as a guard, were encamped all those who had deserted to him in the Battle of the Field of Blood, who had returned to Cuzco from the camp of Huracha, now that Kari was accepted as the royal heir. Also other troops who were loyal to the Inca were stationed nearby, while those who clung to Urco departed secretly to that town where he lay sick. Moreover, proclamation was made that on the day of the new moon, which the magicians declared to be auspicious, Kari would be publicly presented to the people in the Temple of the Sun as the Inca's lawful heir, in place of Urco, disinherited for crimes that he had committed against the Sun, the Empire, and the Inca, his father. "Brother," said Kari to me, for so he called me now that he was an acknowledged prince, when I went to meet him in his grandeur. "Brother, did I not tell you always that we must trust to our gods? See, I have not trusted in vain, though it is true that dangers still lie ahead of me, and perhaps civil war." "Yes," I answered, "your gods are in the way of giving you all you want, but it is not so with mine and me." "What then do you desire, brother, who can have even to the half of the kingdom?" "Kari," I replied, "I cry not for the earth, but for the moon." He understood, and his face grew stern. "Brother, the moon alone is beyond you, for she inhabits the sky while you still dwell upon the earth," he answered with a frown, and then began to talk of the peace with Huracha. The end of Book 2, Chapter 9. Recording by Andy Thames. Book 2, Chapter 10 of The Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Great Horror. The day of the new moon came, and with it the great horror that caused all the empire of Taatsinsuya to tremble, fearing lest heaven should be avenged upon it. Since Upanqui had found his elder son again, he began to dote upon him, as in such case the old and weak-minded often do, and would walk about the gardens and palaces with his arm around his neck, babbling to him of whatever was uppermost in his mind. Moreover, his soul was oppressed because he had done Kari wrong in the past, and preferred Urco to him, under the urging of that prince's mother. "The truth is, son," I myself heard him say to Kari, "that we men who seem to rule the world do not rule it at all, because always women rule us. This they do through our passions which the gods planted in us for their own ends, also because they are more single in their minds. The man thinks of many things, the woman only thinks of what she desires. Therefore the man whom nature already has bemused only brings a little piece of his mind to fight against her whole mind, and so is conquered. He who was made for one thing only, to be the mate of the woman, that she may mother more men in order to serve the wills of other women, who yet seem to be those men's slaves. So I have learned, father, answered the grave Kari, and for this reason, having suffered in the past, I am determined to have as little to do with women as is possible for one in my place. During my travels in other lands, as in this country, I have seen men, great and noble, brought to nothingness and ruin by their love for women, down into the dirt indeed when their hands were full of the world's wealth and glory. Moreover, I have noticed that they seldom learn wisdom, and that what they have done before they are ready to do again, who believe anything that soft lips swear to them. Yes, even that they are loved for themselves alone, as I own, to my sorrow, once I did myself. Urkel could not have taken that fair wife of mine, father, if she had not been willing to go when she saw that I had lost your favour, and, with it, the hope of the scarlet fringe. Here Kari looked at me, of whom I knew he was thinking all this time, and seeing that I could overhear his talk, began to speak of something else. On the appointed day there was a great gathering of the nobles of the land, especially of those of the Inca blood, and of all that were earmen, a class of the same rank as our peers in England, to hear the proclamation of Kari as the Inca's heir. It was made before this gorgeous company in the great temple of the sun, which now I saw for the first time. It was a huge and most wondrous place, well named the House of Gold, for here everything was gold. On the western wall hung an image of the sun, 20 feet or more across, an enormous graven plate of gold set about with gems and having eyes and teeth of great emeralds. The roof, too, and the walls were all panelled with gold. Even the cornices and the column heads were of solid gold. Opening out of this temple also were others dedicated to the moon and stars, that of the moon being clothed in silver, with her radiant face shaped in silver, fixed to the western wall. So it was with the temple of stars, of the lightnings, and of the rainbow, which perhaps with its many colours that sprang from jewels was the most dazzling of them all. The sight of so much glory overwhelmed me, and it came into my mind that, if only it were known of in Europe, men would die by the 10,000 on the chance that they might conquer this country and make its wealth theirs. Yet here, save for these purposes of ornament and to be used as offerings to the gods and Incas, it was of no account at all. But in this temple of the sun was a marvel greater than its gold, for on either side of the carved likenesses of the sun, seated upon chairs of gold, sat the dead Incas and their queens, yes, clothed in their royal robes and emblems, with the fringe upon their brows. There they sat with their heads bent forward, so wonderfully preserved by the arts these people have, that except for the stamp of death upon their countenances, they might have been sleeping men and women. Thus in the dead face of the mother of Kari I could read her likeness to her son. Of these departed kings and queens there were many, since from the first Inca of whom history told all were gathered here in the holy house, and under the guardianship of the effigy of their god, the sun, from whom they believed themselves to be descended. The sight was so solemn that it awed me, as it did all that congregation, for I noted that here men walked with unsandaled feet, and that in speaking none raised their voices high. The old Inca Upanqui entered, gloriously apparelled and accompanied by lords and priests, while after him came Kari with his retinue of great men. The Inca bowed to the company, whereon every one in the great temple, save myself alone, whose British pride kept me on my feet, standing like one left living on a battlefield among a multitude of slain, prostrated himself before his divine majesty. At a sign they rose again, and the Inca seated himself upon his jewelled golden throne beneath the effigy of the sun, while Kari took his place upon a lesser throne to the Inca's right. Looking at him there in his splendour on this day, when he came into his own again, I bethought me of the wretched starving Indian, marked with blows and foul with filth, whom I had rescued from the cruel mob upon the Thames side wharf, and wondered at this enormous change of fortune, and the chain of wonderful events by which it had been brought about. My fortune also had changed, for then I was great in my own fashion, who now had become but a wanderer, welcomed indeed in this glittering new world of which yonder we knew nothing, because I was strange and different, also full of unheard-of learning and skilled in war, but still nothing but an outcast wanderer, and so doomed to live and die. And, as I thought, so thought Kari, for our glances met, and I read it in his eyes. Yonder sat my servant, who had become my lord, and though he was still my friend, soon I felt he would be lost in the state matters of that great empire, leaving me more lonely than before. Also his mind was not as my mind, as his blood was not my blood, and he was the slave of a faith that to me was a hateful superstition, doubtless begotten by the devil, who under the name of Kupai some worshipped in that land, though others declared that this Kupai was the god of the dead. Oh, that I could flee away with Quilla, and at her side live out what was left to me of life, since of all these multitudes she alone understood and was akin to me, because the sacred fire of love had burned away our differences and opened her eyes. But Quilla was snatched from me by the law of their accursed faith, and whatever else Kari might give, he would never give me this Lady of the Moon, since, as he had said, to him this would be sacrilege. The ceremonies began. First Larico, the high priest of the sun, clothed in his white sacerdotal robes, made sacrifice upon a little altar which stood in front of the Inca's throne. It was a very simple sacrifice of fruit and corn and flowers, with what seemed to be strange-shaped pieces of gold. At least I saw nothing else, and am sure that nothing that had life was laid upon that altar, after the fashion of the bloody offerings of the Jews, and indeed of those of some of the other peoples of that great land. Prayers, however, were spoken, very fine prayers, and pure so far as I could understand them, for their language was more ancient and somewhat different to that which was used in common speech. Also the priests moved about, bowing and bending the knees, much as our own do in celebrating the Mass, though whether these motions were in honour of the god or of the Inca, I am not sure. When the sacrifice was over, and the little fire that burned upon the altar had sunk low, though I was told that for hundreds of years it had never been extinguished, suddenly the Inca began to speak. With many particulars that I had not heard before, he told the tale of Kari, and of his estrangement from him in past years, through the plottings of the mother of Urco, who now was dead, like the mother of Kari. This woman, it would appear, had persuaded him, the Inca, that Kari was conspiring against him, and therefore Urco was ordered to take him prisoner, but returned only with Kari's wife, saying that Kari had killed himself. Here Upanqui became overcome with emotion, as the aged are apt to do, and beat his breast, even shedding tears, because most unjustly he had allowed these things to happen, and the wicked triumph over the good. For which sin he said he felt sure his father the sun would bring some punishment on him, as indeed was to chance sooner than he thought. Then he continued his story, setting out all Urco's iniquities and sacrileges against the gods, also his murders of people of high and low degree, and his stealing of their wives and daughters. Lastly he told of the coming of Kari, who was supposed to be dead, and all that story which I have set out. Having finished his tale with much solemn ceremonial, he deposed Urco from his heirship to the empire, which he gave back to Kari, to whom it belonged by right of birth, and calling upon his dead forefathers, one by one, to be witness to the act, with great formality once more he bound the prince's fringe about his brow. As he did this, he said these words: "Soon, O Prince Kari, you must change this yellow circlet for that which I wear, and take with it all the burden of empire. For know that as quickly as may be I purpose to withdraw to my palace at UK, there to make my peace with God before I am called hence to dwell in the mansions of the sun." When he had finished, Kari did homage to his father, and in that quiet, even voice of his, told his tale of the wrongs that he had suffered at the hands of Urco his brother, and of how he had escaped, living but maddened from his hate. He told also how he had wandered across the sea, though of England he said nothing, and been saved from misery and death by myself, a very great person in my own country. Still, since I had suffered wrong there, as he, Kari, had in his, he had persuaded me to accompany him back to his own land, that there my wisdom might shine upon its darkness, and owing to my divine and magical gifts, hither we had come in safety. Lastly, he asked the assembled priests and lords if they were content to accept him as the Inca to be, and to stand by him in any war that Urco might wage against him. To this they answered that they were content, and would stand by him. Then followed many other rites, such as the informing of the dead Incas, one by one, of this solemn declaration, through the mouth of the high priest, and the offering of many prayers to them, and to the sun, their father. So long were these prayers, with the chants from choirs hidden in side chapels, by which they were interspersed, that the day drew towards its close before all was done. Thus it came about that the dusk was gathering when the Inca, followed by Kari, myself, the priests, and all the congregation, left the temple to present Kari as heir to the throne to the vast crowd which waited upon the open square outside its doors. Here the ceremony went on. The Inca and most of us, for there was not space for all, although we were packed as closely together as Hastings herrings in a basket, took our stand upon a platform that was surrounded by a marvellous cable made of links of solid gold which, it was said, needed 50 men to lift it from the ground. Then Upanqui, whose strength seemed restored to him, perhaps because of some drug that he had eaten, or under the spur of this great event, stepped forward to the edge of the low platform and addressed the multitude in eloquent words, setting out the matter as he had done in the temple. He ended his speech by asking the formal question: "Do you, children of the sun, accept the Prince Kari, my firstborn, to be Inca after me?" There was a roar of assent, and as it died away, Upanqui turned to call Kari to him, that he might present him to the people. At this very moment, in the gathering twilight, I saw a great fierce-faced man with a bandaged head, whom I knew to be Urco, leap over the golden chain. He sprang upon the platform, and with a shout of "I do not accept him, and thus I pay back treachery," plunged a gleaming copper knife or sword into the Inca's breast. In an instant, before any could stir in that packed crowd, Urco had leapt back over the golden chain and from the edge of the platform, to vanish amongst those beneath, who doubtless were men of his following, disguised as citizens or peasants. Indeed, all who beheld seemed frozen with horror. One great sigh went up, and then there was silence, since no such deed as this was known in the annals of that empire. For a moment the aged Upanqui stood upon his feet, the blood pouring down his white beard and jewelled robe. Then he turned a little and said in a clear and gentle voice, "Kari, you will be Inca sooner than I thought. Receive me, O God my father, and pardon this murderer who, I think, can be no true son of mine." Then he fell forward on his face, and when we lifted him, he was dead. Still the silence hung. It was as though the tongues of men were smitten with dumbness. At length Kari stepped forward and cried, "The Inca is dead, but I, the Inca, live on to avenge him. I declare war upon Urco, the murderer, and all who cling to Urco." Now the spell was lifted, and from those dim hordes there went up a yell of hatred against Urco, the butcher and parricide, while men rushed to and fro, searching for him. In vain, for he had escaped in the darkness. On the following day, with more ceremonies, though many of these were omitted because of the terror and trouble of the times, Kari was crowned Inca, exchanging the yellow for the crimson fringe, and taking the throne name of Upanqui, after his father. In Cuzco there was none to say him nay, for the whole city was horror-struck because of the sacrilege that had been committed. Also those who clung to Urco had fled away with him to a town named Huarina on the borders of the great lake called Titicaca, where was an island with marvellous temples full of gold, which town lay at a distance from Cuzco. Then the civil war began, and raged for 3 whole months, though of all that happened in that time because of the labour of it, I set down little, who would get forward with my story. In this war I played a great part. The fear of Kari was that the Chancas, seeing the Inca realm thus rent in two, would once more attack Cuzco. This it became my business to prevent. As the ambassador of Kari, I visited the camp of Huaracha, bearing offers of peace, which gave to him more than he could ever hope to win by strength of arms. I found the old warrior king still sick and wasted, because of the hurt from Urco's club, though now he could walk upon crutches, and set out the case. He answered that he had no wish to fight against Kari, who had offered him such honourable terms, especially when he was waging war against Urco, whom he, Huaracha, hated, because he had striven to poison his daughter and dealt him a blow which he was sure would end in his death. Therefore he was ready to make a firm peace with the new Inca, if in addition to what he offered he would surrender to him Quilla, who was his heiress and would be queen of the Chancas after him. With these words I went back to Kari, only to find that on this matter he was as hard as a rock of the mountains. In vain did I plead with him, and in vain did the high priest Larico, by subtle hints and arguments, strive to gentle his mind. "My brother," said Kari, in that soft, even voice of his, when he had heard me patiently to the end, "forgive me if I tell you that in advancing this prayer, for one word you say on behalf of King Huaracha, you say too for yourself, who, having unhappily been bewitched by her, desire this Virgin of the Sun, the Lady Quilla, to be your wife. My brother, take everything else that I have to give, but leave this lady alone. If I handed her over to Huaracha or to you, as I have told you before, I should bring upon myself and upon my people the curse of my father the sun, and of Pachacamac, the spirit who is above the sun. It was because Upanqui, my father, according to the flesh, dared to look upon her after she had entered the house of the sun, as I have learned he did, that a bloody and cruel death came upon him, for so the magicians and the wise men have assured me that the oracles declare. Therefore, rather than do this crime of crimes, I would choose that Huaracha should renew the war against us, and that you should join yourself to him, or even to Urco, and strive to tear me from the throne, for then even if I were slain, I should die with honour." "That I could never do," I answered sadly. "No, my brother Hubert," for now he called me by my English name again, "that you could never do, being what you are, as I know well. So, like the rest of us, you must bear your burden. Mayhap it may please my gods or your gods in the end, and in some way that I cannot foresee, to give you this woman whom you seek. But of my free will I will never give her to you. To me the deed would be as though, in your land of England, the king commanded the consecrated bread and cups of wine to be snatched from the hands of the priests of your temples and cast to the dogs, or given to cheer the infidels within your gates, or dragged away the nuns from your convents to become their lemans. What would you think of such a king in your own country? And what," he added with meaning, "would you have thought of me if there I had stolen one of these nuns, because she was beautiful and I desired her as a wife?" Now, although Kari's words stung me because of the truth that was in them, I answered that to me this matter wore another face, also that Quilla had become a virgin of the sun not of her own free will, but to escape from Urco. "Yes, my brother," he answered, "because you believe my religion to be idolatry, and do not understand that the sun to me is the symbol and garment of God, and that when we of the Inca blood, or those of us who have inner knowledge, talk of him as our Father, we mean that we are the children of God, though the common people are taught otherwise. For the rest, this lady took her vows of her own free will, and of her secret reasons I know nothing, any more than I know why she offered herself in marriage to Urco before she found you upon the island. For you I grieve, and for her also, yet I would have you remember that, as your own priests teach, in every life that is not brutal there must be loss, sorrow, and sacrifice, since by these steps only a man can climb towards the things of the spirit. Pluck, then, such flowers as you will from the garden that fate gives you, but leave this one white bloom alone." In such words as these he preached at me, till at length I could bear no more, and said roughly, "To me it is a very evil thing, O Inca, to separate those who love each other, and one that cannot be pleasing to heaven. Therefore, great as you are, and friend of mine as you are, I tell you to your face that if I can take the Lady Quilla out of that golden grave of hers, I shall do so." "I know it, my brother," he answered, "and therefore, were I as some Incas have been, I should cause this holy spouse to travel more quickly to the skies than nature will take her. But this I will not do, because I know also that destiny is above all things, and that which destiny decrees will happen unhelped by man. Still I tell you that I will thwart you if I can, and that should you succeed in your ends, I will kill you if I can, and the lady also, because you have committed sacrilege. Yes, although I love you better than any other man, I will kill you. And if King Horatia should be able to snatch her away by force, I will make war on him until either I and my people, or he and his people, are destroyed. And now let us talk no more of this matter, but rather of our plans against Urco, since in these at least, where no woman is concerned, I know that you will be faithful to me, and I sorely need your help." So, with a heavy heart, I went back to the camp of Horatia and told him Kari's words. He was very wroth when he heard them, since his gods were different to those of the Incas, and he thought nothing of the holiness of the virgins of the sun, and once again talked of renewing the war. Still it came to nothing for sundry reasons, of which the greatest was that his sickness increased on him as the days went by. Also I told him that much as I desired Quilla, I could not fight upon his side, since I was sworn to aid Kari against Urco, and my word might not be broken. Moreover, the Yuncas, who had been our allies, wearying of their long absence from home and satisfied with the gentle forgiveness and the redress of their grievances, which the new Inca had promised them, were gone, having departed on their long march to the coast, while many of the Chancas themselves were slipping back to their own country. Therefore Horatia's hour had passed by. So at length we agreed that it would be foolish to attack Cuzco in order to try to rescue Quilla, since even if Horatia won in the face of a desperate defence, probably it would be only to find that his daughter was dead or had vanished away to some unknown and distant convent. All that we could do was to trust to fortune to deliver her into our hands. We agreed further that, having obtained an honourable peace and all else that he desired, it would be well for Horatia to return to his own land, leaving me a body of 5,000 picked men who were willing to serve under me, to assist in the war against Urco, to be my guard and that of Quilla, if perchance I could deliver her from the House of the Sun. When this was known, 5,000 of the best and bravest of the chankers, young soldiers who sought adventure and battle, and whom I had trained, stepped forward at once and swore themselves to my service. Bidding farewell to Horatia with these troops, I returned to Cuzco, sending messengers ahead to explain the reason of their coming to Kari, who welcomed them well and gave them quarters round the palace which was allotted to me. A few days later we advanced on the town of Harina, a great host of us, and outside of it met the yet greater host of Urco in a mighty battle that endured for a day and a night, and yet, like that of the field of blood, remained neither lost nor won. When the thousands of the dead had been buried and the wounded sent back to Cuzco, we attacked the city of Harina, I leading the van with my chankers, and stormed the place, driving Urco and his forces out on the farther side. They retreated to the mountains, and there followed a long and tedious war, without great battles. At length, although the Inca's armies had suffered sorely, we forced those of Urco to the shores of the lake Titicaca, where most of them melted away into the swamps and certain tree-clad low-lying valleys. Urco himself, however, with a number of followers, escaped in boats to the Holy Island in the lake. We built a fleet of balsas with reeds and blown-out sheepskins, and followed him. Landing on the isle, we stormed the city of temples, which were more wondrous and even fuller of gold and precious things than those of Cuzco. Here the men of Urco fought desperately, but driving them from street to street, at length we penned them in one of the largest of the temples, of which by some mischance a reed roof was set on fire, so that there they perished miserably. It was a dreadful scene, such as I never wish to behold again. Also, after all, Urco and some of his captains, breaking out of the burning temple under cover of smoke, escaped, either in balsas or, as many declare, by swimming the lake. At least they were gone, nor search as we might on the mainland could they be found. So all being finished except for the escape of Urco, we returned to Cuzco, which Kari entered in triumph, I marching at his side, wearied out with war and bloodshed. The end of Book 2, Chapter 10. Recording by Andy Thames. Book 2, Chapter 11, of The Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The House of Death. Now at one time, during this long war against Urco, victory smiled upon him, though afterwards the scale went down against him. Kari was defeated in a pitched battle, and I, who commanded another army, was almost surrounded in a valley. When everything seemed lost, afterwards I escaped by leading my soldiers round up the slope of a mountain and surprising Urco in the rear, but as it ended well for us, I need not speak of that matter. It was while all was at its blackest for us that a certain officer was brought to me, who was captured whilst striving to desert, or at least to pass our outposts. As it happened, I knew this man again, having, unseen myself, noted him on the previous day, talking earnestly to the high priest Larico, who, with other priests, accompanied my army, perhaps to keep a watch on me. I took this captain apart and questioned him alone, threatening him with death by torment if he did not reveal his errand to me. In the end, being very much afraid, he spoke. From him I learned that he was a messenger from Larico to Urco. Believing that our defeat was almost certain, Larico had sent him to make his peace with Urco by betraying all Kari's and my own plans to him, and revealing how he might most easily destroy us. He said also that he, Larico, had only joined the party of Upanqui and of Kari after him, under threats of death, and that always in his heart he had been true to Urco, whom he acknowledged as his lord and as the rightful Inca, whom he would help to restore to the throne with all the power of the priesthood of the sun. Further, he sent by this spy a secret message by means of little cords cunningly knotted, which knots served these people as writing, since they could read them as well as we read a book. Now, being always desirous of knowledge, I had caused myself to be instructed in the plan of this knot-writing, which by this time I could read well enough. Therefore, I was able to spell out this message. It said, shortly but plainly, that knowing he still desired her, he, Larico, as high priest, would hand over to Urco the Lady Quilla, daughter to the king of the Shankas, who unlawfully had been hidden away among the virgins of the sun. Also that he would betray me, the white god from the sea, who sought to steal her away, into Urco's hands, that he might kill me if he could. When I had mastered all this, I was filled with rage, and bethought me that I would cause Larico to be taken, and suffer the fate of traitors. Soon, however, I changed this mind of mine, and placing the spy in close keeping, where none could come at him, I set a watch on Larico, but said nothing to him or to Kari of all that I had learned. A few days later our fortunes changed, and Urco, defeated, was in full flight to the shores of Lake Titicaca. After this I knew we had nothing more to fear from this fox-hearted high priest, who above everything desired to be on the winning side, and to continue in his place and power. So knowing that I held him fast, I bided my time, because through him alone I could hope to come at Quilla. That time came after the war was over, and we had returned to Cusco in triumph. As soon as the rejoicings were over, and Kari was firmly seated on his throne, I sent for Larico, which, as the greatest man in the kingdom after the Inca, I was able to do. He appeared in answer to my summons, and we bowed to each other, after which he began to praise me for my generalship, saying that had it not been for me, Urco would have won the war, and that the Inca had done well to name me his brother before the people, and to say that to me he owed his throne. Yes, that is true, I answered. And now, since through me you, Larico, are the third greatest man in the kingdom, and remain high priest of the sun, and whisperer in the Inca's ear, I would put you in mind of a certain bargain that we made when I promised you all these things, Larico. What bargain, Lord of the Sea? That you would bring me and a virgin of the sun, who, while she was of the earth, was named Quilla, together, Larico, and enable her to return from those of the sun to my arms, Larico. Now his face grew troubled, and he answered, Lord, I have thought much of this matter, desiring above all things to fulfil my word, and I grieve to tell you that it is impossible. Why, Larico? Because I find that the law of my faith is against it, Lord. Is that all, Larico? I asked with a smile. No, Lord, because I find that the Inca would not suffer it, and swears to kill all who attempt to touch the Lady Quilla. Is that all, Larico? No, Lord, because I find that a woman who has been betrothed to one of the royal blood may never pass to another man. Now perhaps we come nearer to it, Larico. You mean that if this happened, and perchance, after all, Urco should come to the throne, as he might do if Kari his brother died, as any man may die, he would hold you to account. Yes, Lord, if that chanced, as chance it may be, since Urco still lives, and I hear is gathering new armies among the mountains, Certainly he would hold me to account, for I have heard as much. Also our father the sun would hold me to account, and so would the Inca who wields his sceptre upon earth. I asked him why he did not think of all these things before, when he had much to gain, instead of now, when he had gained them through me, and he answered, because he had not considered them enough. Then I pretended to grow angry, and exclaimed, "You are a rogue, Larico. You promise and take your pay, and you do not perform. Henceforth I am your enemy, and one to whom the Inca hearkens. He hearkens still more to this god the sun, and to me, who am the voice of God, white man." He answered, adding insolently, "You would strike too late. Your power over me and my fortunes is gone, white man." "I fear it is so," I replied, pretending to be frightened. "So let us say no more of the matter. After all, there are other women in Cusco besides this fair bride of the sun. Now, before you go, High Priest, will you, who are so learned, help me, who am ignorant? I have been striving to master your method of conveying thoughts by means of knots. Here I have a bundle of strings which I cannot altogether understand. Be pleased to interpret them to me, O most holy and upright High Priest." Then from my robe I drew out those knotted fibres that I had taken from his messenger, and held them before Larico's eyes. He stared at them and turned pale. His hand groped for his dagger till he saw that mine was on the hilt of Wave-Flame, whereon he let it fall. Next the thought took him that in truth I could not read the knot, which he began to interpret falsely. "Have done, traitor," I laughed, "for I know them all. So Urco may wed Quilla, and I may not. Also cease to fret as to that messenger of yours, for whom you seek far and near, since he is safe in my keeping. Tomorrow I take him to deliver his message, not to Urco, but to Kari, and then, traitor." Now Larico, who, notwithstanding his stern face and proud manner, was a coward at heart, fell upon his knees before me, trembling, and prayed me to spare his life, which lay in my hand. Well he knew that if once it came to Kari's ears, even a high priest of the sun could not hope to escape the reward of such treachery as his. "If I pardon you, what will you give me?" I asked. "The only thing that you will take, Lord, the Lady Quilla herself. Hearken, Lord, outside the city is the palace of Opanqui, whom Urco slew. There in the great hall the divine Inca sits embalmed, and into that holy presence none dare enter, save the virgins of the sun, whose office it is to wait upon the mighty dead. Tomorrow, 1 hour before the dawn, when all men sleep, I will lead you to this hall, disguised in the robes of a priest of the sun, so that on the way thither none can know you. There you will find but one virgin of the sun, the lady whom you seek. Take her and begone. The rest I leave to you." "How do I know that you will not set some trap for me, Larico?" "Thus, Lord, that I shall be with you and share your sacrilege. Also my life will be in your hand." "Aye, Larico," I answered grimly, "and if aught of ill befalls me, remember this," and I touched the knotted cords, "will find its way to Kari, and with it the man who was your messenger." He nodded and answered, "Be sure that I have but one desire, to know you, Lord, and this woman whom, being mad, you seek so madly, far from Cusco, and never to look upon your face again." Then we made our plans as to when and where we should meet, and other matters, after which he departed, bowing himself away with many smiles. I thought to myself that there went as big a rogue as I had ever known, in London or elsewhere, and fell to wondering what snare he would set for me, since that he planned some snare, I was sure. Why then did I prepare to fall into it? I asked myself. The answer was for a double reason. first, although my whole heart was sick with longing for the sight of her, now, after months of seeking, I was no nearer to Quilla than when we had parted in the city of the Chankers, nor ever should be without Larico's aid. Secondly, some voice within me told me to go forward, taking all hazards, since, if I did not, our parting would be for always in this world. Yes, the voice warned me that unless I saved her soon, Quilla would be no more. As her archer had said, there was more poison in Cusco, and murderers were not far to seek, or despair might do its work with her. Or she might kill herself as once she had proposed to do. So I would go forward, even though the path I walked should lead me to my doom. That day I did many things. Now, being so great a general and man, or god, among these people, I had those about me who were sworn to my service, and whom I could trust. For one of these, a prince of the Inca blood of the house of Kari's mother, I sent, and gave to him those knotted cords that were the proof of Larico's treachery, bidding him, if aught of evil overtook me, or if I could not be found, to deliver them to the Inca on my behalf, and with them the prisoned messenger who was in his keeping, but meanwhile to show them to no man. He bowed, and swore by the sun to do my bidding, thinking doubtless that, my work finished in this land, I purposed to return into the sea, out of which I had risen, as doubtless a god could do. Next I summoned the captains of the Chankers who had fought under me throughout the civil war, of whom about half remained alive, and bade them gather their men upon the ridge where I had stood at the beginning of the Battle of the Field of Blood, and wait until I joined them there. If it chanced, however, that I did not appear within 6 days, I commanded that they should march back to their own country and make report to King Horatia that I had returned into the sea, for reasons that he would guess. Also I commanded that 8 famous warriors whom I named, men of my own bodyguard who had fought with me in all our battles, and would have followed me through fire or water, or the gates of hell themselves, should come to the courtyard of my palace after nightfall, bringing a litter and disguised as its bearers, but having their arms hidden beneath their cloaks. These matters settled, I waited upon the Inca Kari, and craved of him leave to take a journey. I told him that I was weary with so much fighting, and desired to rest amidst my friends, the Chankers. He gazed at me a while, then stretched out his sceptre to me, in token that my request was granted, and said in a sad voice, "So you would leave me, my brother, because I cannot give you that which you desire. Bethink you, you will be no nearer to the moon," by which he meant Quilla, "at Chanka, than you are at Cuzco, and here, next to the Inca, you are the greatest in the empire, who by decree are named his brother and the general of his armies." Now, though my gorge rose at it, I lied to him, saying, "The moon is set for me, so let her sleep whom I shall see no more. For the rest learn, O Kari, that Horatia has sworn to me that I shall be not his brother, but his son, and Horatia is sick, they say, to death." "You mean that you would choose to be king over the Chankers, rather than stand next to the throne among the Quichuas?" he said, scanning me sharply. "Aye, Kari," I replied, still lying. "Since I must dwell in this strange land, I would do so as a king, no less." "To that you have a right, brother, who are far above us all. But when you are a king, what is your plan? Do you purpose to strive to conquer me, and rule over Tawetsinsuya, as perchance you could do?" "Nay, I shall never make war upon you, Kari, unless you break your treaty with the Chankers, and strive to subdue them." "Which I shall never do, brother." Then he paused a while, and spoke again with more passion than I had ever known in him, saying, "Would that this woman who comes between us were dead. Would that she had never been born. In truth, I am minded to pray to my father the sun that he will be pleased to take her to himself, for then perchance we too might be as we were in the old time, yonder in your England, and when we faced perils side by side upon the ocean and in the forests, a curse on woman the divider, and all the curses of all the gods upon this woman whom I may not give to you. Had she been of my household, I would have bidden you to take her, yes, even if she were my wife. But she is the wife of the god, and therefore I may not. Alas, I may not." And he hid his face in his robe, and groaned. Now when I heard these words I grew afraid, who knew well that she of whom the Inca prays the sun that she may die, does die, and swiftly. "Do not add to this lady's wrongs by robbing her of life as well as of sight and liberty, Kari," I said. "Have no fear, brother," he answered. "She is safe from me. No words shall pass my lips, though it is true that in my heart I wish that she would die. Go your ways, brother and friend, and when you grow weary of kingship, if it comes to you, as to tell the truth, already I grow weary, return to me. Perchance forgetting that we had been kings, we might journey hence together over the world's edge." Then he stood up on his throne and bowed towards me, kissing the air as though to a god, and taking the royal chain that every Inca wore from about his neck, set it upon mine. This done, turning, he left me without another word. With a heavy heart I returned to my palace where I dwelt. At sundown I ate according to my custom, and dismissed those who waited upon me to the servants' quarters. There were but 2 of them, for my private life was simple. Then I slept till past midnight, and rising went into the courtyard, where I found the 8 Chanca captains, disguised as litter-bearers, and with them the litter. I led them to an empty guard-house, and bade them stay there in silence. After this I returned to my chamber and waited. About 2 hours before the dawn, Larico came, knocking on the side door, as we had planned. I opened to him, and he entered, disguised in a hooded cloak of sheep's wool, which covered his robes and his face, such as priests wear when the weather is cold. He gave to me the garments of a priest of the sun, which he had brought with him, in a cloth. I clothed myself in them, though because of the fashion of them to do this I must be rid of my armour, which would have betrayed me. Larico desired that I should take off the sword Waveflame also, but, mistrusting him, this I would not do, but made shift to hide it and my dagger beneath the priest's cloak. The armour I wrapped in a bundle and took with me. Presently we went out, having spoken few words since the time for speech had gone by, and peril, or some fear of what might befall, weighed upon our tongues. In the guard-house I found the Chancas, at whom Larico looked curiously, but said nothing. To them I gave the bundle of armour to be hidden in the litter, and with it my longbow, having first revealed myself to them by lifting the hood of my cloak. Then I bade them follow me. Larico and I walked in front, and after us came the 8 men, 4 of them bearing the empty litter, and the other 4 marching behind. This was well planned, since if any saw us, or if we met guards, as once or twice we did, these thought that we were priests taking one who was sick or dead, to be tended or to be made ready for burial. Once, however, we were challenged, but Larico spoke some word, and we passed on without question. At length, in the darkness before the dawn, we came to the private palace of Dedu Panqui. At its garden gate, Larico would have had me leave the litter with the 8 Chanca warriors, disguised as bearers. I refused, saying that they must come to the doors of the palace, and when he grew urgent, tapped my sword, whispering to him fiercely that he had best beware, lest it should be he who stayed at the gate. Then he gave way, and we advanced, all of us, across the garden to the door of the palace. Larico unlocked the door with a key, and we entered, he and I alone, for here I bade the Chancas await my return. We crept down a short passage that was curtained at its end. Passing the curtains, I found myself in Upanqui's banqueting hall. This hall was dimly lit with one hanging golden lamp. By its light I saw something more wondrous and of its sort more awful than ever I had seen in that strange land. There, on a dais, in his chair of gold, sat dead Upanqui, arrayed in all his gorgeous Inca robes, and so marvellously preserved that he might have been a man asleep. With arms crossed and his sceptre at his side, he sat staring down the hall with fixed and empty eyes, a dreadful figure of life in death. About him and around the dais were set all his riches, vases and furniture of gold, and jewels piled in heaps, there to remain till the roof fell in and buried them, since on this hallowed wealth the boldest dare not lay a hand. In the centre of the hall, also, was a table prepared as though for feasters, for amid jewelled cups and platters stood the meats and wines which day by day were brought afresh by the virgins of the sun. Doubtless there were more wonders, but these I could not see, because the light did not reach them, or to the doorways of the chambers that opened from the hall. Moreover, there was something else which caught my eye. At the foot of the dais crouched a figure, which at first I took to be that of some dead one, also embalmed, perhaps a wife or daughter of the dead Inca, who had been set with him in this place. While I stared at it, the figure stirred, having heard our footsteps, rose and turned, standing so that the light from the hanging lamp fell upon it. It was Quilla, clad in white and purple, with a golden likeness of the sun emblazoned upon her breast. So beauteous did she look, searching the darkness with great blind eyes, and her rich flowing hair flowing from beneath her jewelled headdress, a diadem fashioned to resemble the sun's rays, that my breath failed me, and my heart stood still. "There stands she whom you seek," muttered Larico in a mocking whisper, for here even he did not seem to dare to talk aloud. "Go, take her, you whom men call a god, but I call a drunken fool, ready to risk all for a woman's lips. Go, take her, and ask the blessing upon your kisses of yonder dead king whose holy rest you break." "Be silent," I whispered back, and passed round the table till I came face to face with Quilla. Then a strange dumbness fell upon me, like a spell or dead Upanqui's curse, so that I could not speak. I stood there, staring at those beautiful blind eyes, and the blind eyes stared back at me. Presently a look of understanding gathered on the face, and Quilla spoke, or rather murmured to herself. "Strange, but I could have sworn. Strange, but I seemed to feel. Oh, I slept in my vigils upon that dead old man, who in life was so foolish, and in death appears to have become so wise. And sleeping I dreamed. I heard a step I shall never hear again. I dreamed one was near me whom I shall never touch again. I will sleep once more, for in my darkness what are left to me save sleep and death?" Then at last I found my tongue and said hoarsely, "Love is left, Quilla, and life." She heard and straightened herself. Her whole body seemed to become rigid, as though with an agony of joy. Her blind eyes flashed, her lips quivered. She stretched out her hand, feeling at the darkness. Her fingers touched my forehead, and thence she ran them swiftly over my face. "It is dead or living, it is," and she opened her arms. Oh, was there ever anything more beautiful on the earth than this sight of the blind Quilla thus opening her arms to me, there in the gorgeous house of death? We clung and kissed. Then I thrust her away, saying, "Come swiftly from this ill-omened place. All is ready, the chancres wait." She slipped her hand into mine, and I turned to lead her away. Then it was that I heard a low, mocking laugh. Larico's, I thought, heard also a sound of creeping footsteps around me. I looked. Out of the darkness that hid the doors of the chamber on the right appeared a giant form, which I knew for that of Urco, and behind him others. I looked to the left, and there were more of them, while in front, beyond the gold-laid board, stood the traitor Larico, laughing. "You have the first fruits, but it seems that another will reap the harvest, lord from the sea," he jeered. "Seize her!" cried Urco in his guttural voice, pointing to Quilla with his mace, "and brain that white thief!" I drew Waveflame and strove to get at him, but from both sides men rushed in on me. One I cut down, but the others snatched Quilla away. I was surrounded, with no room to wield my sword, and already weapons flashed over me. A thought came to me. The chankers were at the door. I must reach them, for perhaps so Quilla might be saved. In front was the table spread for the death feast. With a bound I leapt onto it, shouting aloud and scattering its golden furnishings this way and that. Beyond stood the traitor Larico who had trapped me. I sprang at him, and lifting Waveflame with both hands, I smote with all my strength. He fell, as it seemed to me, cloven to the middle. Then some spear cast at me struck the lamp. It shattered and went out. The end of Book 2, Chapter 11. Recording by Andy Thames. Book 2, Chapter 12, of The Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The fight to the death. There was tumult in the halls, shoutings, groans from him whom I had first struck down, the sound of vases and vessels overthrown, and above all those of a woman's shrieks echoing from the walls and roof, so that I could not tell whence they came. Through the gross darkness I went on towards the curtains, or so I hoped. Presently they were torn open, and by the faint light of the breaking dawn I saw my 8 shankers rushing towards me. "Follow!" I cried, and at the head of them groped my way back up the hall, seeking for Quilla. I stumbled over the dead body of Larico and felt a path round the table. Then, suddenly, a door at the back of the hall was thrown open, and by the grey light which came through the doorway I perceived the last of the ravishers departing. We scrambled across the dais where the golden chair was overthrown, and the embalmed Upanqui lay, a stiff and huddled heap upon his back, staring at me with jewelled eyes. We gained the door, which happily none had remembered to close, and passed out into the park-like grounds beyond. 100 paces or more ahead of us, by the glowing light, I saw a litter passing between the trees, surrounded by armed men, and knew that in it was Quilla being borne to captivity and shame. After it we sped. It passed the gate of the park wall, but when we reached that gate it was shut and barred, and we must waste time breaking it down, which we did by help of a felled tree that lay at hand. We were through it, and now the rim of the sun had appeared, so that through the morning mist which clung to the hillside beyond the town we could see the litter, the full half of a mile away. On we went up the hill, gaining as we ran, for we had no litter to bear, nor aught else save the sack of armour which one of the chankers had thought to bring with him when he rushed into the hall, and with it my longbow and shaft. Now at a certain place between this hill and another there was a gorge, such as are common in that country, a gorge so deep and narrow that in places the light of day scarcely struggles to the pathways at its bottom. Into this tunnel the litter vanished, and when we drew near I saw that its mouth was held by armed men, 6 of them or more. Taking my bow from the shanker, I strung it and shot swiftly. The man at whom I aimed went down. Again I shot, and another fell, whereon the rest of them took cover behind stones. Throwing back the bow to the chanker, for now it was useless, we charged. That business was soon over, for presently all those of Urco's men who remained there were dead, save one who, being cut off, fled downhill towards the city, taking with him the news of what had passed in the palace of dead Upanqui. We entered the mouth of the gorge, plunging towards the gloom, though as it chanced this place faced towards the east, so that the low sun, which now was fully up, shone down it and gave us light that later would have been lacking. I, who was very swift of foot, and to whom rage and fear gave wings, outran my companions. Swinging myself round a rock which lay in the pathway, I saw the litter again, not 100 yards ahead. It halted because, as it seemed to me, one or more of the bearers stumbled and fell among the stones. I rushed at them, roaring. Perhaps it had been wiser to wait for my companions, but I was mad and feared nothing. They saw me, and a cry went up of, "The White God! The terrible White God!" Then fear took hold of them, and they fled, leaving the litter on the ground. Yes, all of them fled, save one, Urko himself. He stood there, rolling his eyes and gnashing his teeth, looking huge and awful in those shadows, looking like a devil from hell. Suddenly a thought seemed to take him, and leaping at the litter he tore aside its curtains and dragged out Quilla, who fell prone upon the ground. "If I may not have her, you shall not, white thief! See, I give back his bride to the sun!" he shouted, and lifted his copper sword to pierce her through. Now I was still 10 paces or so away, and saw that before I could reach him, that sword would be in her heart. What could I do? Oh, St. Hubert must have helped me then, for I knew in an instant. In my hand was wave-flame, and with all my strength I hurled it at his head. The great blade hurtled, hissing through the air. I saw the sunlight shine on it. He strove to leap clear, but too late, for it caught him on the hand that he had lifted to protect his head, and shore off 2 of his fingers, so that he dropped his sword. Next instant, still roaring, as doubtless old Thorgrimr my forefather used to do when he fought to the death, for blood is very strong, I leapt on the giant, who, like myself, was swordless. There in the gulf we wrestled. He was a mighty man, but now my strength was as that of 10. I threw him to the ground by a Sussex trick I knew, and there we rolled over and over each other. Once he had me undermost, and I think would have choked me, had it not been that his right hand lacked 2 fingers. With a mighty heave I lifted him so that now we lay side by side. He was groping for a knife. I did not see, but knew it. Near his head a sharp-edged stone rose in the path to the height of a man's hand or more. I saw it, and bethought me what to do if I could. Again I heaved, and as at length he found the knife and stabbed at me, scratching my face, I got his bull's neck upon that stone. Then I loosed my hand and caught him by the hair. Back I pressed his great head, back and back with all my might, till something snapped. Urko's neck was broken. Urko quivered and was dead. I lay by his side, panting. A voice came from the white heap upon the ground by whom and for whom this dreadful combat had been fought, the voice of Quilla. "One died, but who lives?" asked the voice. I could not answer, because I had no breath. All my strength was gone. Still I sat up, supporting myself with my hand and hoping that it would come back. Quilla turned her face towards me, or rather towards the sound that I had made in moving, and I thought to myself how sad it was that she should be blind. Presently she spoke again, and now her voice quavered. "I see who it is that lives," she said. "Something has broken in my eyes, and Lord and love, I see that it is you who live. You, and oh, you bleed." Then the chankers came bounding down the gorge and found us. They looked at the dead giant and saw how he had died, killed by strength, not by the sword. They looked and bent the knee and praised me, saying that I was indeed a god, since no man could have done this deed, killing the huge Urko with his naked hands. Then they placed Quilla back in her litter, and 6 of them bore her down that black gorge. The 2 who remained, for in that fight none of them had been hurt, supported me till my strength came back, for the cut in the face that I had received from Urko's dagger was but slight. We reached the mouth of the gorge and took counsel. To return to Cuzco after what I had done would be to seek death, so we bore away to the right and, making a round, came about 10 o'clock of the morning, unmolested by any, to that ridge on which I had stood at the beginning of the Battle of the Field of Blood. There I found the shankers encamped, some 3,000 of them, as I had commanded. When they saw me living and but little hurt, they shouted for joy, and when they learned who was in that litter, they went well nigh mad. Then the 8 warriors with me told them all the tale of the saving of Quilla and the death of the giant Urko at my hands, whereon their captains came and kissed my feet, saying that I was in truth a god, though heretofore some of them had held me to be but a man. God or man, I answered, I must rest. Let the women tend to Lady Quilla, and give me food and drink, after which I will sleep. At sunset we march home to Huracha, your king and mine, to give him back his daughter. Till then there is naught to fear, since Kari has no troops at hand with which to attack us. Still, set outposts. So I ate and drank, but little of the former, and much of the latter, I fear. And after that I slept as soundly as one who is dead, for I was outworn. When the sun was within an hour of setting, captains awakened me, and said that an embassy from Cusco, 10 men only, waited outside our lines, seeking speech with me. So I rose, and my face and wound having been dressed, caused water to be poured over my body, and was rubbed with oil, after which, clothed in the robes of a Chanka noble, but wearing no armour, I went out with 9 Chanka captains to receive the embassy, on the plain at the foot of the hill, at that very spot where first I had fought with Urko. When we drew near, from out of the group of nobles advanced one man. I looked, and saw that he was Kari, yes, the Inca himself. I went forward to meet him, and we spoke together just out of earshot of our followers. "My brother," said Kari, "I have learned all that has passed, and give you praise, who are the most daring among men, and the first among warriors, you who slew the giant Urko with your naked hands, and thus made your throne safe for you, Kari, and thus made my throne safe for me. You also who clove Larico to the breast in the death house of Upanqui, my father, and thus delivered you from a traitor, Kari, and thus delivered me from a traitor, as I have learned also from your messenger, who handed to me the knotted cord, and from the spy whom you had in your keeping. I repeat that you are the most daring among men, and the first among warriors, almost a god, as my people name you." I bowed, and after a little silence he went on. "Would that this were all that I have to say, but alas, it is not. You have committed the great sacrilege against the sun, my father, of which I warned you. Having robbed him of his bride and my brother, you have lied to me, who told me but yesterday that you had put all thought of her from your mind. To me that was no sacrilege, Kari, but rather a righteous deed, to free one from the bonds of a faith in which neither she nor I believe, and to lead her from a living tomb back to life and love." "And was the lie righteous also, brother?" "Aye," I answered boldly, "if ever a lie can be. Bethink you, you prayed that this lady might die, because she came between you and me, and those that kings pray may die, do die, if not with their knowledge or by their express command. Therefore I said that I had put her from my mind, in order that she might go on living, to cherish you in her arms, brother. Now hearken, because of this deed of yours, we who were more than friends have become more than foes. You have declared war upon my God and me, therefore I declare war upon you. Yet hearken again, I do not wish that thousands of men should perish because of our quarrel. Therefore I make an offer to you. It is that you should fight me here and now, man to man, and let the sun or Pachacamac beyond the sun decide the matter as may be decreed." "Fight you? Fight you, Kari, the Inca?" I gasped. "Aye, fight me to the death, since between us all is over and done. In England you nurtured me. Here in the land of Tawatsinsuya, which I rule today, I have nurtured you, and in my shadow you have grown great, though it is true that had it not been for your generalship, perchance I should no longer be here to throw the shadow. Let us, therefore, set the one thing against the other, and forgetting all between us that is past, stand face to face as foes. Mayhap you will conquer me, being so mighty a man of war. Mayhap also, if that chances, my people, who look upon you as half a god, will raise you up to be Inca after me. should such be your desire." "It is not," I broke in. "I believe you," he answered, bowing his head. "But will it not be the desire of that fair-faced harlot who has betrayed our lord, the sun?" At this word I started and bit my lip. "Ah, that stings you," he went on, "as the truth always stings. And it is well. Understand, white lord, who were once my brother, that either you must fight me to the death, or I declare war upon you and upon the Shanka people, which war I will wage from month to month and from year to year, until you are all destroyed, as destroyed you shall be. But should you fight, and should the sun give me the victory, then justice will be accomplished, and I will keep the peace that I have sworn with the Shanka people. Further, should you conquer me in the name of my people, I swear that there shall still be peace between them and the Shankas, since I shall have atoned your sacrilege with my blood. Now summon those lords of yours, and I will summon mine, and set out the matter to them." So I turned and beckoned to my captains, and Kari beckoned to his. They came, and in the hearing of all, very clearly and quietly, as was his fashion, he repeated every word that he had said to me, adding to them others of like meaning. While he spoke, I thought, not listening overmuch. This thing was hateful to me, yet I was in a snare, since according to the customs of all these peoples, I could not refuse such a challenge and remain unshamed. Moreover, it was to the advantage of the Shankas, aye, and of the Quichuas also, that I should not refuse it, seeing that whether I lived or died, peace would then reign between them who otherwise must both be destroyed by war. I remembered how once Quilla had sacrificed herself to prevent such a war, though in the end that war had come, and what Quilla had done should I not do also? Weary though I was, I did not fear Kari, brave and swift as he might be. Indeed, I thought that I could kill him and perhaps take his throne, since the Quichuas worshipped me, who so often had led their armies to triumph, almost as much as did the Shankas. But I could not kill Kari. As soon would I kill one born of my own mother. Was there then no escape? The answer rose in my mind. There was an escape. I could suffer Kari to kill me. Only if I did this, what of Quilla? After all that had come and gone, must I lose Quilla thus, and must Quilla lose me? Surely she would break her heart and die. My plight was desperate. I knew not what to do. Then, of a sudden, while I wavered, some voice seemed to whisper in my ear. I thought it must be that of St. Hubert. It seemed to say to me, "Kari trusts to his God. Cannot you trust to yours, Hubert of Hastings? You who are a Christian man? Go forward and trust to yours, Hubert of Hastings." Kari's gentle voice died away. He had finished his speech, and all men looked at me. "What word?" I said roughly to my captains. "Only this, lord," answered their spokesman. "Fight you must, of that there can be no doubt. But we would fight with you, the 10 of the Chankas against the 10 of the Quichuas." "Aye, that is good," replied the first of Kari's nobles. "This business is too great to set upon one man's skill and strength." "Have done," I said. "It lies between the Inca and myself," while Kari nodded and repeated "have done" after me. Then I sent one of the captains back to the camp for my sword, and Kari commanded that his should be brought to him, since, according to the custom of these people, when ambassadors meet, neither of us was armed. Presently the captain, holding my sword, returned, and with him servants who brought my armour. Also out of them streamed all the army of the Chankas, among whom the news had spread like wind-driven fire, and lined themselves upon the ridge to watch. As he came, too, I noticed that this captain sharpened Waveflame with a certain kind of stone that was used to give a keen edge to weapons. He brought the ancient weapon and handed it to me on his knee. The Inca's man also brought his sword and handed it to him, as he did so, bowing his forehead to the dust. Well I knew that weapon, since once before I had faced it in desperate battle for my life. It was the ivory-handled sword of the Lord Delaroy, which Kari had taken from his dead hand after I slew him in the solar of my house in the Cheap at London. Then the servant came to me with the armour, but I sent him away, saying that, as the Inca had none, I would not wear it, at which my people murmured. Kari saw and heard. "Noble as ever," he said aloud. "Oh, that such bright honour should have been tarnished by a woman's breath." Our lords discussed the manner of our fighting, but to them I paid little heed. At length all was ready, and we stepped forward to face each other at a given word, clad much alike. I had thrown off my outer garment, and stood bareheaded in a jerkin of soft sheepskin. Kari, too, was stripped of his splendid dress, and clad in a tunic of sheepskin. Also, that we might be equal, he had taken off his turban-like headgear, and even the royal fringe, whereat his lords stared at each other, for they thought this a bad omen. It was just then I heard a sound behind me, and turning my head I saw Quilla stumbling towards us down the stony slope, as best her half-blind eyes would let her, and crying as she came, "Oh, my lord, fight not! Inca, I will return to the House of the Sun." "Silence, accursed woman," said Kari, frowning. "Does the sun take back such as you? Silence until the woe that you have wrought is finished, and then wail on forever." She shrank back at his bitter, unjust words, and, guided by the women who had followed her, sank upon a stone, where she sat still as a statue or as dead Upanqui in his hall. Now one called aloud the pledges of the fight which were as Kari had spoken them. He listened, and added, "Be it known also that this battle is to the death of one or both of us, since if we live I take back my oaths, and I will burn yonder witch as a sacrifice to the sun whom she has betrayed, and destroy her people and her city, according to the ancient law of vengeance on the house of those who have deceived the sun." I heard, but made no answer, who did not wish to waste my breath in bandying words with a great man whose brain had been turned by bigotry and woman-hatred. A moment later the signal was given, and we were at it. Kari leapt at me like the tree-lion of his own forests, but I avoided and parried. Thrice he leapt, and thrice I did this, yes, even when I saw an opening, and might have cut him down. Almost I struck, then could not. The shankers watched me, wondering what game I played, who was not wont to fight in this fashion. And I also wondered, who still knew not what to do. Something I must do, or presently I should be slain, since soon my guard would fail and Delaroy's sword get home at last. I think that Kari grew perplexed at this patient defence of mine, and never a blow struck back. At least he withdrew a little, then came for me with a rush, holding his sword high above his head with the purpose of striking me above that guard, or so I supposed. Then, of a sudden, I knew what to do. Wheeling Wayflame with all my strength in both hands, I smote, not at Kari, but at the ivory handle of his sword. The keen and ancient steel that might well have been some of that which, as legend told, was forged by the dwarfs in Norseland, fell upon the ivory between his hand-grip and the crosspiece, and shore through it, as I had hoped that it would do, so that the blade of Kari's sword, severed just above the hilt, fell to the ground, and the hilt itself was jarred from his hand. His nobles saw and groaned, while the shankers shouted with joy, for now Kari was defenceless, and save for the death itself, this fight to the death was ended. Kari folded his arms upon his breast and bent his head. "It is the decree of my God," he said, "and I did ill to trust to the sword of a villain whom you slew. Strike, conqueror, and make an end." I rested myself upon Wayflame and answered, "If I strike not, O Inca, will you take back your words and let peace reign between your people and the Chankers?" "Nay," he answered. "What I have said, if yonder false woman is given up to suffer the fate of those who have betrayed the sun, then there shall be peace between the peoples, but not otherwise, since while I live I will wage war upon her and you, and upon the Shankers, who shelter both of you." Now rage took hold of me, who remembered that while this woman-hater lived blood must flow in streams, but that if he died there would be peace and Quilla would be safe. So I lifted my sword a little, and as I did so Quilla rose from her stone and stumbled forward, crying, "O Lord, shed not the Inca's holy blood for me. Let me be given up, let me be given up." Then some spirit entered into me, and I spoke, saying, "Lady, half of your prayer I grant, and half I deny. I will not shed the Inca's blood, as soon would I shed yours, nor will I suffer you to be given up who have done no wrong, since it was I who took you away by force, as Urko would have done. Kari, hearken to me. Not once only, when we were in danger together in past days, have you said to me that we must put our faith in the gods we worship, and thus we did. Now again I hearken to that counsel of yours, and put my faith in the God I worship. You threaten to gather all the strength of your mighty empire, and because of what I hold to be your superstitions, to destroy the Shanka people to the last babe, and to level their city to the last stone. I do not believe that the God I worship will suffer this to come about, though how he will stay your vengeance I do not know. Kari, great Inca of Tawatinsuya, lord of all this strange new world, I, the white wanderer from the sea, give you your life and save you as once before I saved you in a far land. And with your life I give you my blessing in all matters but this one alone. Kari, my brother, look your last on me and go in peace." The Inca heard, and raising his head, stared at me with his fine melancholy eyes. Then suddenly from those eyes there came a gush of tears. More, he knelt before me and kissed the ground as the humblest of his slaves might do before his own majesty. "Most noble of men," he said, lifting himself up again, "I worship you. Yes, I, the Inca, worship you. Would that I might take back my oath, but this I cannot do, because my God hardens my heart, and then would decree destruction on my people. Mayhap he whom you serve will bring things to pass as you foretell. As it would seem, he has brought it to pass that I should eat the dust before you. I hope that it may be so, who love not the sight of blood, but who, like the shot arrow, must yet follow my course, driven by the strength that loosed me. Brother, honoured and beloved, fare you well. May happiness be yours in life and death, and there in death may we meet again, and once more be brothers, where no women come to part us." Then Kari turned and went with bowed head, together with his nobles, who followed him as sadly as those who surround a corpse, but not until they had given to me that royal salute which is only rendered to the Inca in his glory. The end of Book 2, Chapter 12. Recording by Andy Thames. Book 2, Chapter 13. Of the Virgin of the Sun. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Kiss of Quilla. Her women bore Quilla swooning from that ill-fated field, and sick and sad she remained, until once more we saw the city of the Shankers. Yet all this while strength and sight were returning to her eyes, so that in the end she could see as well as ever she had done, for which I thanked heaven. Messengers had gone before us, so that when we drew near all the people of the Shankers came out to meet us, a mighty multitude, who spread flowers before us and sang songs of joy. On the same evening I was summoned by Huracha, and found him dying. There, in the presence of his chief captains, Quilla and I told him all our story, to which he listened, answering nothing. When it was finished, he said, I thank you, Lord from the sea, who through great perils have saved my daughter, and brought her home to bid farewell to me, untarnished as she went. I understand now that it was an evil policy which led me to promise her in marriage to the Prince Urko. Through your valour it has come to naught, and I am glad. Great dangers still lie ahead of you and of my people. Deal with them as you will and can, for henceforward, Lord from the sea, they are your people, yours and my daughter's together, since it is my desire and command that you too should be wed so soon as I am laid with my fathers. Perchance it had been better if you had slain the Inca when he was in your hand, but man goes where his spirit leads him. My blessing and the blessing of my gods be on you both and on your children. Leave me, for I can say no more." That night King Huracha died. 3 days later he was buried with great pomp beneath the floor of the Temple of the Moon, not being preserved and kept above ground, after the fashion of the Incas. On the last day of the mourning, a council was summoned of all the great ones in the country, to the number of several hundreds, to which I was bidden. This was done in the name of Quilla, who was now named by a title which meant High Lady or Queen. I went to it eagerly enough, who had seen nothing of her since that night of her father's death, for according to the custom of this people, she had spent the time of mourning alone with her women. To my surprise, I was led by an officer, not into the great hall, where I knew the notables were assembling, but to that same little chamber where first I had talked with Huracha, Quilla's father. Here the officer left me wondering. Presently I heard a sound and, looking up, saw Quilla herself, standing between the curtains, like to a picture in its frame. She was royally arrayed and wore upon her brow and breast the emblem of the moon, so that she seemed to glitter in that dusky place, though nothing about her shone with such a light as did her large and doe-like eyes. "Greeting, my lord," she said in her soft voice, curtsying to me as she spoke. "Has my lord aught to say to me? If so, it must be quick, since the great council waits." Now I grew foolish and tongue-tied, but at length stammered out, "Nothing, except what I have said before, that I love you." She smiled a little in her slow fashion, then asked, "Is there naught to add?" "What can there be to add to love, Quilla?" "I know not," she answered, still smiling. "Yet in what does the love of man and woman end?" I shook my head and answered, "In many things, all of them different. In hell sometimes, and more rarely in heaven." "And on earth, which lies between the two, should those who love escape death and separation?" "Well, on earth, in marriage." She looked at me again, and this time a new light shone in her eyes, which I could not misinterpret. "Do you mean that you will marry me, Quilla?" I muttered. "Such was my father's wish, lord, but what is yours? Oh, have done," she went on in a changed voice. "For what have we suffered all these things, and gone through such long partings and dangers so dreadful? Was it not that if fate should spare us, we might come together at last? And has not fate spared us for a while? What said the prophecy of me in the temple of Rimac? Was it not that the sun should be my refuge, and I forget the rest?" "I remember it," I said, "that in the beloved arms you should sleep at last." "Yes," she went on, the blood mounting to her cheeks, "that in the beloved arms I should sleep at last. So the first part of the prophecy has come true." "As the rest shall come true," I broke in, awaking, and swept her to my breast. "Are you sure," she murmured presently, "that you love me, a woman whom you think savage, well enough to wed me?" "Aye, more than sure," I answered. "Hearken, lord, I knew it always, but being woman, I desired to hear it from your own lips. Of this be certain, that though I am but what I am, a maiden, wild-hearted and untaught, no man shall ever have a truer and more loving wife. It is my hope, even, that my love will be such that in it, at last, you may learn to forget that other lady far away, who once was yours, if only for an hour. Now I shrank, as from a sword prick, since first loves, whatever the tale of them, as Quilla guessed or nature taught her, are not easily forgot, and even when they are dead, their ghosts will rise and haunt us. And my hope, most dear, is that you will be mine, not for an hour, but for all our life's days, I answered. Aye, she said, sighing, but who knows how many these will be? Therefore let us pluck the flowers before they wither. I hear steps. The lords come to summon us. Be pleased to enter the council at my side and holding me by the hand. There I have somewhat to say to the people. The shadow of the Inca Kari, whom you spared, still lies cold upon us and them. Before I could ask her meaning, the lords entered, 3 of them, and glancing at us curiously, said that all were gathered. Then they turned and went before us to the great hall, where every place was filled. Hand in hand we mounted the dais, and as we came, all the audience rose and greeted us with a roar of welcome. Quilla seated herself upon a throne, and motioned to me to take my place upon another throne at her side, which I noted stood a little higher than that on which she sat, and this, as I learned afterwards, not by chance. It was planned so to tell the people of the Shankers that henceforth I was their king, while she was but my wife. When the shouting had died away, Quilla rose from her throne and began to speak, which, like many of the higher class of this people, she could do well enough. "Lords and captains of the Shanka nation," she said, "my father, the King Huracha, being dead, leaving no lawful son, I have succeeded to his dignities, and summoned you here to take counsel with me. First, learn this, that I, your queen and lady, have been chosen as wife by him who sits at my side." Here the company shouted again, thus announcing that this tidings pleased them. For though by now only the common people still believed me to be a god risen from the sea, all held that I was a great general and a great man, one who knew much that they did not know, and who could both lead and fight better than the rest of them. Indeed, since I had slain Urco with my hands and overcome Kari, who as Inca was believed to be clothed with the strength of the sun, and therefore unconquerable, I was held to be unmatched throughout Tawetsinsuya. Moreover, the army that had fought under my command loved me as though I were their father, as well as their general. Therefore all greeted this tidings well enough, without astonishment, for they knew it was their dead king's wish that I should wed his daughter, and that to win her I had gone through much. In answer to their shoutings, I, too, rose from my seat, and drawing the sword Waveflame which I wore girt about my dinted armour, with it I saluted first Quilla and then the gathered nobles, saying, "Lords of the Chankers, when on an island in the sea my eyes fell upon this lady, who today is your queen, I loved her and swore that I would wed her if I might. Between that day and this much has befallen. She was snatched away to be made the wife of Urco, heir to the Inca throne, and afterwards to escape him whom she hated. She took refuge in the house of the Inca god. Then, people of the Shankers, came the great war, which we shared together, and in the end I rescued her from that house of bondage, and slew Urco while he strove to steal or stab her. This done, I conquered Kari the Inca, who was as my brother, yet because I saved your lady from his god the sun, became my enemy, and together she and I returned to this her land. Now it is her will to wed me, as it has always been mine to wed her, and here in front of you all I take her to wife, as she takes me to husband, hoping that for many years it may be given to us to rule over you, and to our children after us. Yet I warn you that although in the great war that has been, if with much loss, we have held our own against all the hosts of Cuzco, and won an honourable peace, by this marriage of ours, which robs the Inca god of one of 1,000 brides, that peace is broken. Therefore in the future, as in the past, there will be war between the Quichua and the Chanca peoples." "We know it," shouted the nobles. "War is decreed. Let war come." "What would you have had me do?" I went on. "Leave your queen to languish in the House of the Sun, wed to nothingness? Or suffer her to be dragged away to be one of Urco's women? Or hand her back to Kari to be slain as a sacrifice to a god whom you do not accept?" "Nay," they cried, "we would have her wed you, white lord from the sea, that she may become a mother of kings." "So I thought, Shankers. Yet I warn you that there is trouble near. The storm gathers, and soon it will burst, since Kari is not one who breaks his oaths." "Why did you not kill him when he was in your hand, and take his throne?" asked one. "Because I could not. Because it would not have been pleasing to heaven that I should slay a man who for years had been as my brother. Because in this way or in that the deed would have fallen back upon my head, upon the head of the Lady Quilla, and upon your heads also, O people of the Chancas, because—" At this moment there was a disturbance at the end of the hall, and a herald cried, "An embassy! An embassy from Kari, the Inca!" "Let it be admitted," said Quilla. Presently up the central passage marched the embassy with pomp, great lords and earmen, every man of them, and bowed before us. "Your words," said Quilla quietly. "They are these, lady," answered the spokesman of the party. "For the last time the Inca demands that you should surrender yourself to be sacrificed, as one who has betrayed the sun. He asks it of you since he has learned that your father, Huracha, is no more." "And if I refuse to surrender myself, what then, O ambassador?" "Then, in the name of the Empire, and in his own name, the Inca declares war upon you, war to the end, until not one of Chanca blood is left living beneath the sun, and not one stone marks where your city stood. It may be that a while will pass before this sword of war falls upon your head, since the Inca must gather his armies and give a breathing space to his peoples after all the troubles that have been. Yet if not this year, then next year, and if not next year, then the year after, that sword shall fall." Quilla listened and turned pale, though more, I think, with wrath than fear. Then she said, "You have heard, Shankers, and know how stands this case. If I surrender myself to be sacrificed, the Inca in his mercy will spare you. If I do not surrender myself, soon or late he will destroy you, if he can. Say, then, shall I surrender myself?" Now every man in that great hall leapt up, and from every throat there arose a shout of "Never!" When it had died away, an aged chief and counsellor, an uncle of Huracha, the dead king, came forward and stared at the envoys with his horny eyes. "Go back to the Inca," he said, "and tell him that the threats of the mouth are one thing, and the deeds of the hand are another. In the late war that has been he has learned something of our quality, both as foes and friends, and perchance more remains for him to learn. Yonder is one," and he pointed to myself, "who is about to become our king and the husband of our queen. By the help of that one, and of some of us, the Inca won his throne. From the mercy of that one also, but a little while ago, the Inca won his life. Let him be careful, lest through the might of that one, behind whom stands every Chanca that breathes, the Inca Kari Upanqui should yet lose both throne and life, and with them the ancient empire of the sun. Thus say we all." "Thus say we all!" repeated the great company with a roar that shook the walls. In the silence that followed, Quilla asked, "Have you aught to add, O ambassadors?" "Aye, this," said the first of them. "The chancre tree is about to be cut down, but the Inca still offers a refuge to the lion that hides among its branches, because he has loved that lion from of old. Let the white lord from the sea, over whom you have cast the net of witcheries, return with us, and he shall be saved and given place and power, and with them a brother's love." Now Quilla looked at me, and I rose to speak, but could not, since all that came from my lips was laughter. At length I said, "But the other day when I gave him his life, the Inca named me noble. What would he think of me if I said yes to this offer? Would he call me noble then, and the lion that dwells in the chancre tree? Or, whatever his lips might speak, would not his heart name me the basest of slaves and no lion of the tree, but rather a snake that creeps at its roots? Get you gone, my lords, and say that here I bide, happy with her whom I have won, and that the ancient sword Waveflame, on which Kari has looked of late, is still sharp, and the arm that wields it is still strong, and that he will do well, now that it has served his turn, to look on it no more." And again I drew the great blade and flashed it before their eyes there in that dusky hall. Then, bowing courteously, for every man of them knew me, and some of them loved me well, they turned and went. That was the last that ever I, Hubert of Hastings, saw of the nobles of the Inca blood, though perchance ere long I shall meet them again in war. "Let them be escorted safely from the city," commanded Quilla, and soldiers went to do her bidding. When they had gone, she issued another order, that the door should be closed and watchmen set about the hall, so that none could approach it unseen. Then, after a pause, she rose and spoke. "My lord," she said, "who soon, as I trust, will be my husband and my king, and you, the chosen of my people, hearken to me, for I have a matter to lay before you. You have heard the Inca's message, and you know that his words are not in vain. He who is great in many ways, in one is small and narrow. He sets his God before his honour, and to satisfy his God, whom he thinks that I have outraged, is prepared to sacrifice his honour, and even to kill one to whom he owes all." And she touched me with her hand. "Moreover, these things he can do, not at once but in time to come, because for every man of ours he is able to gather 10. Therefore we stand thus, death and destruction stare us in the face." She paused, and that old chief of whom I have spoken asked in the midst of a silence, as I think was planned that he should ask, "You have set your teeth in the bitter rind of truth. Is there no sweet fruit within? Can you not show us a way of escape, O Quilla, daughter of the moon, whose heart is fed with the wisdom of the moon?" "I believe that I can show you such a way," she answered. "You know the legend of our people, that in the old days, 1,000 years ago, we came to this country out of the forests. You know, too, the legend tells that once far away, beyond the forest, there was a mighty empire, of which the king sat in a city of gold hidden within a ring of mountains. That king, it is said, had 2 sons, and when he died, these sons made war upon each other, and one of them, my forefather, was defeated and driven away into the forests by those who clung to him. By boats he descended the river that runs through the forest, and at length with those who remained to him came to this land, and there once more grew to be a king. Is it not so?" "It is so," answered the aged chief. "The tale has come down to me through 10 generations, and with it the prophecy that in a day to come the chancres would return to that city of gold, whence they came, and be welcomed of its people." "I have heard that prophecy," said Quilla. Moreover, of it I have something to tell you. While I sat in despair and blindness in the convent of the Sun at Cuzco, it came into my mind, and I brooded upon it much, who was always sure that the war between the Chancas and the armies of the Incas was but begun. In my darkness I prayed to my mother the moon for light and help. Long and often I prayed, and at length an answer came. One night the spirit of the moon appeared to my soul as a beautiful and shining goddess, and spoke to me. "Be brave, daughter," she said, "for all that seems to be lost shall yet be found again, and the light of a certain flashing sword shall pierce the blackness and give back vision to your eyes." This, indeed, happened, my people, since it was when the sword of my lord saved me from death at the hands of Urco that the first gleam of light returned to my darkened eyes. "Be not afraid, moreover, for the children of the Chancas who bow to me," went on the shining spirit of the moon, "since in the day of their danger I will show them a path towards my place of resting in the west. Yea, I will lead them far from wars and tyrannies, back to that ancient city whence they came, and there they shall sleep in peace till all things are accomplished. Moreover, you shall be their ruler during your appointed days, you and another whom I led to you out of the deeps of the sea and showed to you sleeping in my beams." Thus that spirit spoke to me, counsellors, though at the time I did not know whether the vision were more than a happy dream, but now I do know that it was no dream, but the truth. For did not my sight begin to return to me in the flashing of the sword that is named Flame of the Wave? And if this were true, why should not the rest be true also? People of the Chancas, I am your queen today, and my counsel to you is that we flee from this land, before the Inca's net closes round us and the Inca's spears pierce our heart, to seek our ancient home far in the depths of the western forest, where, as I trust, his armies cannot come. Is that your will, O my people? If so, by the tongues of your lords and captains declare it here and now, before it be too late." Back thundered the answer, "It is our will, O daughter of the moon." When its echoes had died away, Quilla turned to me, lovely to look on as the evening star, and with eyes that shone like stars, and asked, "Is it your will also, O Lord from the sea?" "Your will is my will, Quilla," I answered, "and your heart is my home. Lead on. Where you go, I follow, even to the edge of the world and beyond the world." "So be it," she cried in a triumphant voice. "Now the evil past is finished with its fears and battles, and before our feet, lit by moonbeams, stretches the future's shining road leading us to the mystery in which all roads begin, and for an hour are lost again. Now, too, our separations end in a perfect unity, that perchance we have known before, and shall know again in ages to be born and lands revisited. Now, Lord from the sea, at whose coming my sleeping heart awoke to love, and whose sword saved me from shame and death, giving me back to life and light, here, before this company of our people, I, the daughter of the moon, defying the sun who held me captive, and all his servants, take you to husband with this kiss." And leaning forward, Quilla pressed her lips upon my own. The remaining parchment sheets of the ancient manuscript are rotted with the damp of the tomb in which it lay for centuries, and quite undecipherable. Editor. End of Book 2, Chapter 13. The End of The Virgin of the Sun by H. Rider Haggard. Recording by Andy Thames.